Imagine waking up one day and looking in the mirror, not just to check your hair or your face, but to actually see the staring back. The strong, focused, unshakable version of yourself that's been waiting to come out. Now be honest. How often do you feel like that person? How often do you feel grounded, calm, clear, like you're actually your life and not just reacting to it? Real you living. Most people don't. Most people feel like they're running on a treadmill they never signed up for. Distracted, overwhelmed, anxious, comparing themselves to others, and wondering why life feels so heavy all the time. But what if I told you there's a way to change that? What if I told you that ancient wisdom, yes, wisdom that's over 2,000 years old, holds the key to building the strongest, clearest, most powerful version of you? Welcome to Stoicism. No, it's not about being cold. No, it's not about hiding your feelings. It's about becoming mentally bulletproof in a world that tries to pull you in 1,000 directions. It's about waking up with purpose, speaking with clarity, and living with strength, no matter what life throws at you. This isn't just another self-help guide full of cliches and fluffy quotes. This is the ultimate manual to becoming you. The version of you that doesn't break under pressure, doesn't seek validation, and doesn't wait for permission to grow. So here's what I want you to do before we begin. Write in the comments. Starting today, I become the best version of me. I am stoic. You're not just typing a sentence. You're setting a new standard. You're making a decision, one that will echo in your habits, your emotions, your relationships, and your future. Say it, write it, feel it, because from this moment on, you're not just living, you're leading yourself. Let's begin. Let's be honest. Most people wait for a big moment to change their life. A new year, a new job, a new relationship. They think transformation happens in loud explosions. But the truth? Real change happens in silence. In the smallest actions you repeat when no one is watching. Not in once-in-a-lifetime events, but in the tiny decisions you make every single day without even thinking about them. These choices feel unimportant in the moment, whether to sit up straight or slouch, whether to listen or interrupt, whether to breathe deeply or let your anxiety win. But over time, these small, invisible decisions quietly build your reality. They shape your confidence, your habits, your relationships, your future. Let's go deeper. You don't become angry overnight. It happens in micro moments, when you choose to snap instead of pause, when you scroll instead of reflect, when you let one tiny annoyance build on top of another. You don't become disciplined from one big decision. It begins when you get up the first time your alarm rings, when you choose water over soda, when you put your phone down and stay present. These aren't dramatic moments. They're barely noticeable. But like water slowly carving stone, they change the shape of who you are. Now here's what's even more interesting. Your brain doesn't always know which choices are big and which are small. It just follows the pattern you teach it. If you often choose distraction, your brain will make that easier to access. If you regularly choose focus or kindness or control, your brain learns to make that your default. That's why one deep breath when you're upset is more powerful than it seems, because it teaches your mind that you're in charge. Even how you speak becomes a pattern. Most people don't realize that the words they use in casual conversation create long-term beliefs. Say, "I'm tired," every day, and your body starts to feel it more often. Say, "I can't," every time you're nervous, and your confidence crumbles. But change those phrases to "I'm figuring it out" or "I've got this," and your brain follows. Micro-decisions are like seeds. You don't see them grow in the moment, but give it time, and suddenly your life is filled with either weeds or wildflowers, all depending on what you chose when it didn't feel like it mattered. Let's break this down even further. One of the most underestimated decisions we make daily is how we respond when no one expects anything from us. Think about this. You're walking down the hallway. No one's around. Do you drag your feet? Do you walk with purpose? It seems like nothing, but every step sends a signal to your subconscious. You're either saying, "I'm in charge," or "I'm just getting by." That energy follows you. Same thing with how you treat yourself when you mess up. Do you call yourself stupid? Or do you pause and say, "That wasn't my best, but I'm still growing"? One choice leaves a scar. The other builds resilience. And let's talk about presence. You could be with someone, a partner, a friend, a colleague, and make the tiny decision to fully listen instead of mentally checking out. That small shift could be the moment that deepens trust, heals a conflict, or strengthens a bond. And they won't even realize what happened. But you will, and your life becomes better, one connection at a time. Now, here's the truth no one talks about. Your future self is being built by these tiny actions you're taking right now. You don't meet that version of you someday far away. You become them by choosing well today, in the way you eat, speak, move, rest, think, and show up. The gym isn't just about exercise, it's about proving to yourself again and again that you follow through. Reading one page of a book isn't just about learning something new, it's about building identity. I'm someone who grows. Even how you breathe plays a role. When you're stressed and your chest is tight, you're telling your nervous system something is wrong. But take 3 deep, slow breaths and your body starts to believe, "I am safe." From that place, your decisions change. Your energy shifts. Your reactions become choices, not explosions. It goes deeper. You also teach people how to treat you through these tiny choices. Every time you tolerate disrespect, stay silent when something matters, or say yes when you mean no. You're not just avoiding discomfort, you're building a personal brand. Not the one you post about, but the one people feel when they're around you. And if you want respect, alignment, peace, it starts with what you allow and what you don't, in the smallest ways. Think about when you walk into a room. Do you enter with awareness, noticing the energy, making eye contact? Or do you slip in quietly, hoping no one notices? One choice trains confidence, the other trains invisibility. Every entrance is a decision, and every decision leaves a trace. You don't need to overhaul your life. You need to master the little moments that add up to it. For example, take your phone. The micro decision to check social media right after waking up seems harmless. But what you're actually doing is telling your brain, "Other people's lives come before my peace." Repeat that every day, and soon you don't even know what you want anymore, because you filled your mind with noise before your own thoughts had a chance to speak. Same with bedtime. When you scroll late at night instead of resting, you're not just losing sleep, you're training yourself to numb instead of reset. Over time, your body burns out, your motivation disappears, and you wonder why you're always exhausted, when the answer was hidden in those late-night micro-decisions. Even your posture is a choice. Yes, how you hold your body, shoulders back or slouched forward, eye contact or eyes down. These subtle shifts either send power through your nervous system or drain it. Research shows that how you sit and stand changes your hormone levels, affects your self-talk, and even impacts how others treat you. So next time you sit down, do it like someone who belongs in the room. One of the biggest lies we believe is that we'll start tomorrow. But tomorrow is just another version of today, shaped by the same micro-decisions you're making now. The truth is, you already started. Every thought, every breath, every response is you casting a vote for the person you are becoming. So the question is not, when will you start? It's, what are you choosing right now? Here's another hidden truth. Your emotional triggers are also shaped by these little decisions. When you get used to reacting quickly, snapping, shutting down, avoiding, your brain makes that your default. But when you decide to pause, even for 1 second, and breathe before reacting, you're building a new habit. You're telling your nervous system, we do things differently now. Do that often enough, and even your emotions begin to follow your leadership instead of dragging you around. And let's not forget about the voice in your head, that constant narrator. You don't need to silence it, you need to train it. And how do you do that? Through the daily decision to question it. When it says, you're not good enough, you say, where's the proof? When it says, they're better than you answer, that's not my race. These responses seem small, but each one is a thread in the armor you're building. One of the most powerful micro-decisions you'll ever make is how you end your day. Not just brushing your teeth or locking the door, but the final thoughts you allow before sleep. Regret, worry, or gratitude, clarity, surrender. What you fall asleep thinking about becomes the emotional fuel for your dreams, your rest, your tomorrow. Even how you treat your space reflects your micro-decisions. A messy desk may not seem like a big deal, but every time you sit there, you feel overwhelmed, distracted. Tidy it up, and without saying a word, your environment tells your brain, we are focused, we are ready. Micro-decisions are also the reason habits work. Not because you do something once in a big way, but because you do it over and over in small ways. The first workout is hard. The second is awkward. The 10th becomes easier. By the 30th, it's part of your identity. And it's not just about showing up. It's about deciding to show up even when it's boring, inconvenient, or uncomfortable. This is what Stoicism teaches us at its core. You can't always control the storm, but you can control how you respond to it. And that response is not one big heroic act. It's in the moment you pause instead of explode. The moment you ask, what's in my control, instead of blaming everything else. The moment you choose reason over reaction. It's also in how you use your time. Every yes is a no to something else. Say yes to gossip, you say no to focus. Say yes to scrolling, you say no to creativity. Say yes to procrastination, you say no to momentum. That's the real price of your micro-decisions. They cost you possibilities, so start watching them. Not in a stressful way, but with curiosity. Like a detective, notice what you reach for when you're bored, what you say when you're nervous, what you avoid when it's time to act. That awareness alone can shift everything. Because once you see the power of these micro moments, you'll realize this is where your life is actually happening. Not later, not someday, right here, right now, in what you choose next. And that's the most powerful realization of all. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a better next move, and that starts now. So now you know, Your life is shaped by the smallest choices, not the dramatic ones, but the quiet ones you repeat daily. That realization is powerful, but there's a deeper layer, one most people never even think to question. The truth is this: every micro decision you make is cast through the filter of who you think you are. Not who you want to be, not who you pretend to be, but who you believe you are on a level so deep it often hides beneath your awareness. That belief, it drives everything. Here's where it gets interesting. Most of your identity wasn't created by you. It was absorbed, handed down, formed in the fog of childhood, shaped by family, society, teachers, culture, religion, media. Layer by layer, you inherited beliefs about who you are, how worthy you are, what you're capable of, and what you're allowed to become. And you never stop to ask, is any of this even true? So now the question becomes, if your identity was shaped without your permission, can it be reshaped with your awareness? Yes, and that's what you're about to do. Building identity on purpose is not about faking a new personality. It's about remembering who you really are before the world got its hands on you, and then consciously choosing who you want to be from this day forward. This begins with radical clarity. You can't design what you haven't defined. And the first step is identifying the difference between beliefs you chose and beliefs you were taught to accept. If you were told you're shy, bad at math, not a leader, not creative, or too much, chances are you started acting in ways that confirm that story, because humans crave consistency. Even if the label is painful, we cling to it because it feels familiar. But identity isn't supposed to be a trap. It's meant to be a foundation you build on, not a prison you live in. So begin here. What are the traits you've accepted as fact about yourself, and who gave them to you? Who told you you weren't smart, strong, beautiful, capable, and more importantly, were they qualified to define you? Probably not. Now let's go deeper. Your identity is shaped by the meaning you give to your past. Two people can go through the same event and create completely different stories. One says, "That failure means I'm worthless." The other says, "That failure taught me who I never want to be again." Same moment, different identity. This means you are not your past. You are the story you tell about your past, and you can rewrite it at any time. Start with your pain. That's where the biggest clues hide. Not to dwell on it, but to understand how it shaped your self-image. If someone left you, betrayed you, ignored you, it likely planted a belief like, "I'm not good enough," or "I'm unlovable." But that belief is not truth. It's a scar, and scars can either make you guarded or they can make you wise. When you design identity consciously, you start asking better questions. What kind of person do I want to be when no one is watching? What values do I want to lead with? What traits do I want people to feel in my presence? What would the highest version of me choose in this moment? Now let's talk about values. Most people live by habits. Very few live by values. And that's the difference between drifting and building. Values are your chosen North Star. They're not just nice words like kindness or strength. They are anchors. And if you haven't written yours down, chances are you're living by someone else's. So take a moment to define them. Not what sounds good, what feels real. If you value growth, honesty, depth, creativity, live it. Not once in a while, but especially when it's inconvenient. That's when identity becomes real. When your values guide you in the moments when compromise would be easier. Now let's address the role of language. The words you use to describe yourself become the blueprint of your life. Saying "I'm bad with money" builds an identity that blocks wealth. Saying "I'm terrible with people" becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But what if you shifted it to "I'm learning to be better with money" or "I'm becoming more confident around people"? Tiny shift, massive effect. The brain is always listening, and it believes whatever you repeat most. That means your self-talk is not just commentary, it's instruction, it's programming, and every sentence builds a version of you, whether you mean it to or not. Let's now explore behavior. Identity is not built through affirmations alone. You don't become confident by saying "I am confident" in the mirror if your actions don't reflect it. Identity is action-based. If you want to be someone who reads, you don't need a vision board. You need to pick up a book. Want to be disciplined? Start by making your bed. Want to be kind? Look people in the eyes and really listen. Identity is not decided in thought. It's proven in motion. This is how you start making identity real. Small, repeatable actions that reinforce your chosen traits. Not once, not twice, but every day, until your mind accepts, "This is who I am now." Let's be honest. At first, this will feel like you're lying to yourself. That's okay. Growth often feels like pretending, because you're acting from a new place instead of the old one. But here's the key. You're not pretending to be someone else. You're remembering who you are before the fear took over. So when you feel resistance, that's not a red flag. That's proof you're growing beyond the identity that's been keeping you small. Let's touch on environment. You cannot outgrow your identity if your environment constantly reminds you of your old self. The people you surround yourself with, the content you consume, the energy in your space, it all reflects back the version of you you're trying to outgrow or expand into. If everyone around you gossips, it becomes harder to choose honesty. If your environment is full of clutter, your mind mirrors that chaos. This isn't about blame, it's about design. If you want to become someone new, create an environment that supports the new version. Clean the space, change the music. Follow people who live the values you admire. What surrounds you shapes you. Let's go further. You have different versions of yourself already inside you. There's the version that speaks up with confidence, the one that stays silent to avoid conflict, the one who takes action, the one who procrastinates, the one who leads, the one who hides. None of these are fake. They're just dormant or dominant, depending on which one you feed. Designing your identity means choosing which version gets to take the lead, not by killing off the others, but by aligning your behavior with your vision moment by moment. You want to feel strong? Make a strong choice. You want to be disciplined? Act on what matters even when it's hard. That's how you shift your identity, by taking the reins back from autopilot and choosing on purpose. Now let's break a myth. You don't need to find yourself. You're not a lost set of keys. You're a sculptor with a chisel. Your job is not to search for who you are. It's to create it, bit by bit, thought by thought, choice by choice. The version of you you admire isn't a mystery. It's a formula. Beliefs you choose, actions you repeat, standards you protect, and values you live by, especially when no one else does. Identity is not fixed. It never was. The most dangerous thing you can say is, "This is just how I am," because that statement is not humility. It's surrender, and you were built for more than that. So here's the truth. You are always becoming. Whether you know it or not, you're shaping your identity every time you respond with courage or cowardice, Every time you follow through or make excuses. Every time you raise your standard or lower it to fit in. And once you become aware of that, you step into real power. This power isn't loud. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need proof. It shows up quietly in how you speak, how you walk, how you choose, how you rest, how you handle failure, how you treat others. Identity shows up when the pressure is on, and how you respond then is determined by what you built in private. So now that you know this, you can stop waiting for permission. You can stop clinging to old labels, old pain, old roles that no longer fit. You're not too late. You're not too broken. You're not too anything. You're just one aligned decision away from becoming the next version of you. Let this be the chapter where you stop letting your past define your potential. Let this be the shift where you become a builder of identity, not a prisoner of old definitions. Because the strongest identity isn't the one that resists change. It's the one that's built with so much clarity, so much intention, so much truth, that when life changes, it adapts without losing itself. And that version of you, that's who you're building now. So now you understand. You're not a fixed personality. You're a design in progress. A living blueprint that shifts with intention, refines through action, and strengthens every time you choose integrity over old identity. But even with the clearest values and the most powerful mindset, there's still something that sneaks in the back door, silently shaping your decisions when you're not looking. Your emotions, not the pleasant ones that make life feel light, but the ones you try to hide. Shame, fear, envy. These emotions don't just disrupt your peace. They shape how you speak, what you expect from yourself, and even what you believe you deserve. And if left unmanaged, they quietly sabotage your progress, even when everything else looks like it's working. Most people are taught to avoid these feelings, to bury them under distractions, humor, or even positive thinking. But avoiding doesn't dissolve, it delays. And what you delay ends up running your life from the background. That's why emotional alchemy isn't about escaping your emotions. It's about using them, turning them into power. Because when you face them, understand them, and redirect their energy, they no longer control you. They fuel you. Start with shame. It's one of the most misunderstood emotions because it wears so many masks. Sometimes it sounds like self-judgment, sometimes like perfectionism, sometimes like silence when you should speak. But at its core, shame is the voice that says, "There's something wrong with me." The first step in transforming shame is learning to separate behavior from identity. You may have made a mistake. That doesn't mean you are the mistake. You may have done something you regret. That doesn't mean you are unworthy. This distinction sounds simple, but it's the root of healing. Without it, shame becomes cement. It holds you down. With it, shame becomes a signal. It tells you where you're ready to grow. Most of the shame you carry isn't even yours. It was projected onto you from parents who didn't heal, teachers who misunderstood you, friends who judged your pain, society that told you you had to be perfect to be worthy. That shame stuck because no one taught you how to push back. Now is the time to change that. Start with self-honesty. You can't alchemize what you won't admit. Sit with it. Trace it back. Ask, where did I learn to feel shame about this? Then ask, does that belief help me grow or keep me small? If it keeps you small, it's not truth. It's just old programming. Once you bring it to light, the shame starts to loosen. Then comes the next step. Expression. Speak it. Write it, move it through your body. Shame thrives in silence, but the moment it's named, it loses power. You stop being a prisoner and start becoming the observer. That shift is everything. Then there's fear. Not the kind that keeps you from touching a hot stove, that's survival, but the kind that whispers in your ear every time you try to change. The fear of failing, of being seen, of outgrowing people, of not being good enough. Fear is not your enemy. It's your nervous system doing its job. It was trained to protect you based on what hurt you before. It's trying to help, but it's using outdated instructions. Emotional alchemy means updating the script. Start by noticing when fear speaks. Don't push it away. Listen, not to obey it, but to understand it. Ask, what is this fear trying to protect me from? Often, you'll find that it's pointing at something valuable. Fear of failure means you care about doing it well. Fear of judgment means your voice matters. Fear of change means something big is waiting. Once you've named the purpose behind the fear, take one small action anyway. The key here is small. You don't need to slay a dragon. You just need to prove to your system that you can feel fear and still move. That one step builds trust. Repetition builds identity. Fear shrinks when you walk through it. It grows when you run from it. So train your nervous system to walk slowly through the fire. Each time, the fire gets smaller. Now let's talk about envy. It's the emotion most people don't want to admit they feel. It's uncomfortable. It feels like weakness. But envy is not weakness. It's insight. It's a signal of what you deeply want but haven't given yourself permission to pursue. When you feel envy, pause. Don't judge it. Don't stuff it down. Ask, what does this person's success or life represent to me? Then go further. What am I truly craving? It might not be the job, the body, or the lifestyle. It might be the freedom, the confidence, the visibility. When you find that core, you've found a compass. That's when envy becomes useful. It stops being a poison and starts being a mirror. It shows you what parts of yourself are asleep and what needs to wake up. The next step is redirection. Instead of letting envy trigger comparison or self-judgment, use it to create clarity. Ask yourself, what am I willing to do to build this version of me? Now envy becomes motivation. The energy that once pulled you down now pulls you forward. And here's where all three of these emotions connect. They are built on one thing: judgment. Internal judgment of self. That's why the real alchemy begins when you shift from judgment to curiosity. Shame says, I'm broken. Curiosity asks, where did this story come from? Fear says, this will go wrong. Curiosity says, what if this is exactly what I need to grow? Envy says, they have what I don't. Curiosity says, what is this showing me about my hidden desires? That shift from judgment to curiosity is not soft. It's powerful. It breaks the cycle of emotional reactivity. It opens space for transformation. Another powerful tool is somatic awareness. Emotions don't just live in the mind, they live in the body. Shame might show up as tightness in the throat. Fear might be a pounding heart. Envy might be a pit in the stomach. Learning to notice where the emotion lives gives you leverage, because once you feel it, you can move it. Breathing into the sensation, naming it, letting it move without forcing it to disappear. That's emotional strength, not controlling the feeling, but staying centered while it passes through. You can also use physical expression to move stuck emotion. Shake your body, dance to a single song, go for a walk and talk out loud to yourself. Journal with no filter. Emotions are energy. If you don't move them, they harden. If you allow them to move, they teach. One of the most underestimated tools is language reframing. The moment you feel an emotion rising, catch your internal dialogue. Instead of saying, "This always happens to me," try, "This is showing me where I still need healing." Instead of, "I'll never get over this," say, "This is helping me build capacity." Words aren't decoration. They are emotional instructions. Change the language, and you change how your system responds. Another approach is identity anchoring. This is when you meet your emotions not from the wounded self, but from the higher self you're becoming. So when shame whispers, "You're not enough," you answer from your strongest self, "That's not true anymore." When fear says, "Stay small," you respond, "But I was made to expand." When envy says, "You're behind," you declare, "I'm building something real, and that takes time." This inner dialogue becomes a form of self-leadership. And every time you meet the emotion, instead of running from it, you reinforce, "I am safe, I am capable, I am becoming." One more piece: boundaries. Emotional alchemy also means protecting your emotional space. That includes not just who you spend time with, but what energy you let into your field. People who constantly shame you, trigger fear, or amplify comparison, they don't get full access. Protect your peace like it's your job, because it is. And finally, forgiveness. This is the most advanced emotional transformation skill. Not forgiveness as in, what they did was okay, but forgiveness as in, I won't let this pain define who I am anymore. When you forgive, not just others, but yourself, you reclaim energy. You close open emotional loops. You take back the power that the emotion has been draining from you. The goal is not to never feel negative emotions. That's impossible and even dangerous. The goal is to feel them fully, understand them quickly, and redirect them powerfully. When you do that, emotions become allies, not enemies. They become fuel. They become tools. They become the very path that takes you deeper into clarity, strength, and purpose. And that is emotional alchemy. Not because it sounds poetic, but because it works. Now that you know how to transform heavy emotions into clarity and forward motion, there's something else beneath the surface that needs attention. Something even more silent, more hidden, and just as destructive. The invisible threads, the quiet habits, the subtle patterns you don't even realize you're repeating that quietly eat away at your self-worth, one moment at a time. They don't show up with flashing signs. They wear normal clothes. They sound casual, harmless. They show up in your tone, your humor, your reflexes in conversation. They live in the background of your daily life, which makes them hard to catch and even harder to change. But they matter, because these micro-habits create the emotional baseline you live from, and when you don't see them clearly, they become your ceiling. Self-worth isn't built in a single moment of confidence. It's the result of hundreds of subtle behaviors you repeat until your nervous system believes, I am valuable. And just as you can build that belief, you can accidentally destroy it by reinforcing habits that signal to your brain and body that you're not enough. One of the most overlooked examples is self-deprecating humor. It sounds funny. It makes people laugh. It even makes you feel temporarily comfortable in social settings. But each time you make a joke at your own expense, you send a message to yourself. I need to lower my value to be accepted. Over time, this becomes your emotional default. You stop trying to show up fully. You believe that being less is safer than being real. The fix isn't to stop having fun, it's to ask yourself this: am I joking to connect, or am I joking to hide? Humor that connects is warm, light, shared. Humor that hides is sharp, automatic, and often deflects intimacy. The shift comes when you learn to express your personality without making yourself the punchline. Another sneaky pattern is constant comparison. Not the obvious kind where you scroll for hours and envy someone's life. The subtle version happens quietly, in your thoughts. When someone does well, you instantly shrink. When someone looks confident, you assume you're behind. When someone succeeds, your brain tells you that you're failing. That loop, repeated often enough, makes you feel like no amount of progress is enough, because someone is always doing it better. Comparison doesn't just hurt, it rewires your perception. You stop trusting your pace. You stop recognizing your growth. You start believing your worth is conditional on how you stack up against someone else's highlight reel. The solution isn't pretending not to see others. It's learning to see yourself as well. That means pausing in those moments and saying, their success doesn't threaten mine. That small internal shift makes space for self-acknowledgement without defensiveness. Then there's the habit of constant apology. Not when you've made a mistake. That's healthy. This is the reflex to say sorry for existing, for having a need, for taking up space, for expressing a thought. It trains your brain to believe you're a burden, that your presence requires permission. Watch for it in conversations. If you're saying sorry when you mean thank you, you're reinforcing guilt instead of gratitude. If you're apologizing for setting a boundary, you're giving away your emotional ground. Every unnecessary apology chips away at your confidence and invites others to treat you accordingly. A better practice is replacing reflexive apology with clarity. Say, thank you for your patience, instead of, sorry I'm late. Say, I appreciate your time, instead of, sorry for bothering you. Language matters. It trains identity. Another pattern that damages self-worth is over-explaining. It comes from the need to justify your decisions, feelings, or boundaries, usually because deep down, you fear that who you are isn't enough without explanation. You try to earn understanding. You give long answers when a simple no would do. You write essays in texts to avoid conflict or rejection. But over-explaining doesn't create connection. It creates emotional exhaustion. You feel drained because you're constantly trying to prove your right to exist. The real shift happens when you start trusting that your decisions don't need permission slips. You don't need to shrink your truth to fit someone else's comfort zone. A calm, grounded, "this is what I need," is more powerful than 10 paragraphs of justification. Another subtle habit is the constant need for reassurance. You may not notice it because it often looks like conversation. Asking for feedback too often. Needing someone to tell you you're doing okay. Fishing for validation without realizing it. Over time, this creates a dependency loop. Your self-worth becomes external. You feel strong only when someone else tells you so. But true confidence is built internally. You don't need to stop asking for support, but you do need to check where it's coming from. Are you asking because you want perspective, or because you don't trust yourself? Building internal reassurance means learning to sit with doubt without letting it define your direction. It's about practicing this thought. Even if no one validates me, I still believe in my direction. Let's not forget digital habits. Every time you check your phone without reason, especially when you're uncomfortable, you're sending a message to yourself. I don't want to be with me. It seems small, but it builds a pattern of avoidance. You train your nervous system to escape the present moment. Over time, this creates disconnection, not just from others, but from your own thoughts, feelings, and clarity. Replacing this begins with creating small rituals of presence. Sitting in silence for 5 minutes before checking your phone, pausing before responding, looking around the room and noticing 3 things. These actions seem insignificant, but they send a powerful message to your subconscious. I can handle myself. I want to be here. Then there's the habit of minimization. Downplaying your achievements, saying, "It's not a big deal," when it actually is. Shrinking in moments when you should be proud. This might come from humility, but it often stems from fear of being seen. You protect yourself by staying small, but in doing so, you teach your nervous system that visibility is unsafe and that your wins aren't worth celebrating. To rewire this, start with small acknowledgements. Don't wait for someone else to notice. Say it to yourself. That was hard, and I did it. This doesn't need to be loud or dramatic. It needs to be consistent. Every time you validate your own effort, you rebuild trust with yourself. Another hidden habit is sarcasm. Used often, it becomes a mask, a way to shield vulnerability with sharpness. Sarcasm can sound clever, but when overused, it blocks emotional honesty. You start using irony instead of saying what you really feel. You cover discomfort with comedy, and the price is distance from others and from your own truth. This doesn't mean you can't be witty. It means noticing when sarcasm is being used to avoid depth. The more you allow directness, the more others will feel safe with you, and the more you will feel safe with your own emotions. People also build identity around performance. When your worth is tied to output, how much you produce, achieve, fix, solve, you create a fragile self-image. You're only as valuable as what you do. So when you rest, you feel guilty. When you slow down, you feel behind. This creates burnout masked as ambition. To break the loop, you must separate productivity from value. Your worth doesn't increase with effort. It exists before achievement. That mindset doesn't make you lazy. It makes you whole. And wholeness creates energy that doesn't rely on external approval to be sustained. Another pattern that often hides in plain sight is people-pleasing. Saying yes when you mean no. Agreeing to avoid conflict. Smiling when you feel tense. These habits are rooted in the belief that your needs are negotiable. Over time, they dissolve boundaries, and without boundaries, self-worth has no walls to protect it. Saying no is not rejection, it's direction. It tells the world where your value begins and ends. The more often you honor your truth in small decisions, the more solid your identity becomes. You stop seeking permission to rest, to pause, to protect your energy. That clarity is not selfish, it's sacred. Another habit that hijacks self-worth is internal mocking. That small, cruel voice that says, "Of course you failed," or "typical you." You may think this voice is motivating you, keeping you disciplined, but it's not. It's wounding you. And wounds don't create strength, they create fear. To shift this, you need to become your own advocate. That means speaking to yourself the way you'd speak to someone you love. You can be honest and still be kind. You can hold high standards without using shame as a weapon. The words you say to yourself in hard moments are the bricks that either rebuild or break your foundation. Also, beware of emotional outsourcing. That's when you make someone else responsible for how you feel. They make me feel anxious. They need to reassure me. This habit may feel justified, but it gives away your power. You become reactive instead of responsive. You lose track of your internal compass. Taking responsibility for your emotional state doesn't mean pretending to be unaffected. It means learning to pause, reflect, and choose your internal narrative, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Even how you breathe speaks volumes. Shallow breaths train your body to stay in a subtle fight or flight state. It tells your nervous system, we're unsafe here. Over time, this low-level stress erodes your confidence from the inside out. Deep, conscious breathing isn't just relaxation, it's identity work. Each time you breathe deeply, you signal to yourself, I can handle this, I belong here. Finally, the habit of delaying joy. Telling yourself you'll feel better once you succeed, once you look different, once everything is perfect. That belief keeps worth forever out of reach. You train your brain to associate happiness with the future and discontent with the present. That delay creates chronic emptiness. To break it, find joy now, in small wins, in the sound of your own laughter, in a clean room, in saying no without guilt. These moments might seem minor, but they teach your system that joy doesn't need to be earned, it's allowed. What all these patterns have in common is this: they are practiced daily, quietly, unconsciously, and because of that, they shape how you feel about yourself more than you realize. But once you see them, you can choose differently, not by force, by awareness. That awareness is power. And when you reclaim it, you stop surviving your self-worth and start building it. Every pattern you shift, every small habit you rewire, every new choice you repeat becomes proof. Proof that you are not your past programming, you are your current practice. And that practice starts here. Now that the invisible habits that shape how you see yourself have been exposed, the next step is to decide who you're becoming and how you're going to get there, deliberately, not by chance, not by waiting for life to teach you in random bursts, but by building your own path forward, one that reflects your personal goals, learning style, and future identity. This is where self-apprenticeship begins. Most people go through life following someone else's script. They learn passively, only reacting to challenges when forced. They wait to be taught, mentored, or given permission. But the truth is, no one is coming to hand you a curriculum for your best life. If you want to evolve into the person you know you're capable of being, you must become your own teacher, your own guide, your own architect of mastery. To do this, you must first decide what mastery means to you, not in someone else's language, but in your own. That clarity becomes the foundation for everything else. Your mastery might be creative expression, mental clarity, financial strength, emotional resilience, or spiritual grounding. It could be a mix of these, but if you don't define what you're working toward, you'll drift in circles, collecting random skills without direction. Once you define your aim, the next step is to break it down into the building blocks that will lead you there. This isn't about creating a 5-year plan. It's about identifying the competencies, perspectives, and behaviors that match your future self, and then choosing to study them intentionally. Every skill, whether internal or external, can be reverse engineered. If you admire someone's calm under pressure, that's not just personality. It's a learned way of responding. If you respect someone's communication skills, you can study how they speak, pause, and hold space. Mastery begins by studying models, not copying them, but understanding the mechanics behind what they do. You're not building a curriculum for school, you're building one for your evolution. That requires honesty about your current gaps. What are you avoiding? What intimidates you? Where do you consistently struggle? These aren't weaknesses to be ashamed of. They're the compass points that show you where your next growth lies. The best apprentices don't just study strengths, they study struggle. They dig into discomfort with curiosity, not shame. They ask questions like, why do I avoid this task? What belief is underneath my resistance? What skill would make this easier? That kind of thinking turns every obstacle into a classroom. A personal mastery curriculum should include both knowledge and practice. Learning without application stays in theory. Application without learning becomes routine. You need both. That means every concept you study must be followed by an action, something small, consistent, measurable. For example, if you're building emotional intelligence, reading a book is one part. But the real lesson happens when you apply what you read the next time you feel triggered. If you're working on discipline, watching a video might spark awareness. But true progress shows up when you say no to comfort and yes to structure, even when no one is watching. To make your self-apprenticeship stick, tailor it to your natural learning rhythm. Everyone absorbs differently. Some people need silence and deep focus. Others learn best through conversation or movement. Some remember by writing, others by speaking. Don't fight your style. Design for it. This means experimenting with formats, podcasts during walks, visual diagrams for complex ideas, voice memos to process emotion, written reflections to sharpen clarity. Self-apprenticeship is not about forcing yourself into someone else's system. It's about designing your own and evolving it as you grow. It also means recognizing when you're stuck and knowing how to pivot. Learning is not linear. You'll have weeks where everything clicks and weeks where it all feels stale. That's not failure. That's feedback. Instead of quitting, ask, is this the right method? Is this the right timing? Is this still aligned with my goal? Adaptability keeps the journey alive. A major key to mastery is self-feedback. You can't rely only on external validation to measure growth. That's too inconsistent. Build a habit of reviewing yourself, not to criticize, but to observe with precision. After a difficult conversation, reflect. What did I handle well? What would I change next time? After completing a project, ask, what did I learn? What stretched me? What needs improvement? This type of review turns every life event into a lesson. It sharpens awareness, and it builds internal guidance, which is essential when pursuing long-term change without constant outside input. Another tool is themed learning. Instead of trying to grow everything at once, choose a single theme for a season. 1 month focused on communication, 1 month on energy management, 1 month on setting boundaries. This kind of focused attention builds depth, and with depth comes integration. The point where what you've learned becomes how you live. Don't forget, integration is different from information. Reading 10 books doesn't mean you've mastered a subject. Living out the core idea of one chapter consistently creates more transformation than skimming through volumes of theory. So go slow enough to embody what you're learning. This is where rituals help. Rituals are anchored behaviors that signal importance to your brain. When you start your day with a short reflection, your brain knows this is a learning space. When you end your day reviewing what you practiced, your nervous system registers growth. Repeating this consistently transforms scattered information into lived wisdom. The best self-apprentices also build learning communities. You don't need to be alone. Growth accelerates when you share it. This doesn't mean looking for teachers to idolize. It means finding people who are also evolving, reflecting, asking better questions. You rise faster in an environment where growth is normal, not rare. Even your conversations can become part of your curriculum. Ask better questions in daily interactions. Seek insight instead of validation. Listen to how people speak when they're grounded. Notice what changes their tone, their confidence, their presence. Every interaction is a case study if you're paying attention. Self-apprenticeship also involves creative output. You don't need to be an artist to create. Creation is a form of internal integration. Writing, drawing, mapping ideas, speaking your insights aloud. All of these help make your learning tangible. They give form to what's forming inside you. Track your progress, not obsessively, but intentionally. Small notes, a growth journal, a monthly review. Patterns will emerge. You'll notice where you're stuck and where you're thriving. This allows for gentle course correction. You're not looking for perfection, you're tracking momentum. Another key is learning across domains. If you're working on leadership, don't just study business books. Learn from athletes, artists, poets, historians. Wisdom is everywhere. The more angles you explore, the more integrated your mastery becomes. The greatest innovators think across disciplines. At the same time, beware of passive consumption. Binge learning without embodiment creates an illusion of progress. Always bring learning back to this question: what is the next action this knowledge asks me to take? That's the difference between hoarding insight and becoming wise. Let your identity shape your curriculum. You're not just collecting skills, you're becoming someone. Choose your inputs based on who that someone is. If your future self speaks with clarity, studies communication. If your future self leads with calm, study nervous system regulation. Let the future you be the professor assigning today's lesson. Build in pauses. Space matters. You're not a machine. Learning requires digestion. Silence is part of growth. Taking a walk, watching the sky, breathing without distraction. These moments create space for insight to land. Don't rush them. They're not breaks. They're part of the design. Commit to one hard thing per season. Something that stretches your comfort zone. A public talk, a personal project, a habit you've avoided. Challenge is the gym of identity. It reveals your gaps and builds your edges. Without it, growth becomes theoretical. With it, learning becomes real. Use friction as a mirror. When something is hard, don't label it as failure. Ask, what skill is being called forward? What belief is being tested? What pattern is being revealed? This mindset keeps you empowered, even in discomfort. You are not just building skills, you're shaping how you process life, how you think, decide, speak, move, rest. This is not about being better than others, it's about being more aligned with yourself. Treat setbacks as modules. Every failure contains a lesson you couldn't learn in success. Extract the insight. Write it down. Turn it into a new principle. Over time, Your worst moments will become your deepest textbooks. Stay grounded in your why. Without it, the process loses soul. You're not doing this to impress anyone. You're doing it to free yourself, to meet your potential, to serve from fullness instead of emptiness. No one will clap for you as you study late, reflect alone, choose growth over ease. That's okay. You're not building for applause. You're building for alignment, for strength, for clarity, for impact. This is not a sprint. It's a lifelong relationship with your own becoming. It will shift as you evolve. What you need now won't be what you need a year from now. But if you keep listening, adjusting, and moving with intention, your life becomes the greatest syllabus you'll ever follow. And the version of you that rises through it, that version isn't just skilled. That version is sovereign. You've now built a structure around who you want to become and how you plan to evolve through focused, personalized learning. But with so much direction, intention, and input, there's a point where clarity no longer comes from adding more. It comes from something else, something our fast, noisy world rarely values. Stillness, not laziness, not avoidance, not numbing. True, intentional stillness, the kind that doesn't come from zoning out but from tuning in. The kind that doesn't feel empty but deeply awake. This space, quiet, slow, undistracted, holds some of the most profound transformation available to your mind and body. Most people never experience it because stillness is uncomfortable at first. It strips away distractions. It holds up a mirror. It makes you feel the weight of your thoughts, your emotions, your restlessness. But this discomfort isn't a problem. It's the beginning of the reset. And your brain, quite literally, begins to change when you allow it. In stillness, your nervous system has a chance to leave the state of survival. The constant low-grade stress, the shallow breathing, the mental noise, it doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects how your brain functions. When you stay in that constant stimulation loop, your brain stays in reactive mode. It becomes harder to access insight, patience, emotional regulation, or clarity. But when you enter intentional silence, your brain waves begin to slow down. You shift out of the high-frequency beta state, associated with overthinking, fear, and urgency, and begin to move into alpha and theta states, where creativity, healing, and deeper awareness live. This is not spiritual fluff. It's neurological fact. You can't think your way into clarity if the mind is overloaded. Silence allows the brain to process unresolved emotion, disconnected thoughts, and sensory buildup. Think of your mind as a glass of water filled with dirt. Constant movement keeps the dirt swirling. Stillness lets it settle. As the mental sediment drops, you begin to see what's really there. You hear the quieter voice beneath the noise, the part of you that always knew what to do, but couldn't be heard over the volume of daily life. This is where intuition strengthens. You don't grow intuition by trying harder, you grow it by listening longer. Practicing stillness trains your attention. Most people believe they can't focus, but the real issue is they've never trained their mind to stop grabbing at everything. When you sit in silence, even for 5 minutes, you begin to notice how loud your thoughts are. You also notice you don't have to obey them. That space between thought and reaction, that's where freedom lives, and stillness is what stretches that space. Stillness also resets emotional overwhelm. When you're anxious, angry, or overstimulated, your amygdala, the emotional reaction center of the brain, gets activated. When you pause, breathe, and sit with what you feel without distraction, your brain begins to down-regulate. your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in, your cortisol levels drop. The body gets a signal. We are not in danger. We can recalibrate. It's during this recalibration that insight occurs. Not because you forced it, but because the noise stopped long enough for truth to surface. Stillness also increases neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. When you allow space between input and output, you give your mind a chance to build new associations. Old reactions weaken. New patterns have room to grow. This is why people often leave silent retreats or periods of solitude feeling transformed. It's not magic, it's biology. And yet in daily life, silence feels unnatural. We reach for noise, we check our phones in line, we fill every pause with scrolling. These are not just habits, they're avoidance tactics. We fear silence because it confronts us with ourselves. But what if the very thing you avoid is the thing that could restore you? In silence, your emotional literacy improves. You begin to feel more with less intensity. You notice subtle cues in your body, tension in your jaw, heaviness in your chest, ease in your breath. These signals were always there, you just couldn't hear them over the static. And here's the deeper truth. When you get better at being in stillness, you get better at being in life. You respond instead of react. You hear what someone means, not just what they say. You observe your thoughts without being controlled by them. You return to center faster after stress. That is emotional maturity, and it's grown in silence. Stillness also clarifies priorities. When you disconnect from constant input, you stop absorbing other people's urgency. You remember what matters to you. You realize how much of your attention has been hijacked by agendas that don't align with your values. This isn't about withdrawal. It's about sovereignty. A quiet mind makes cleaner choices. Even your creativity benefits. You may think your best ideas come when you're working hard, but real insight often arrives in the gaps, during a walk, a shower, a pause between tasks. Stillness allows your brain's default mode network to activate. This is where connection, imagination, and deep insight happen. You don't force creative clarity, you make space for it. Stillness isn't about shutting down, it's about tuning in. And it doesn't require a mountain retreat. It starts with small, daily choices. Sitting without music, drinking tea without multitasking, lying down with your hand on your heart and breathing slowly for 2 minutes. These are micro moments that retrain your system to access quiet. Consistency matters more than intensity. You don't need an hour of silence. You need 5 minutes, practiced daily. That repetition is what rewires your pathways. You're teaching your nervous system that silence is not a threat. It's a sanctuary. Stillness also invites honesty. When you slow down, you begin to see what you've been avoiding. You notice what decisions you've been postponing, what emotions you haven't processed, what truths you've silenced. And yes, this can be uncomfortable, but it's also empowering, because once seen, it can be addressed. Silence is also a form of spiritual alignment, not necessarily religious, but deeply rooted in your connection to life, meaning, and presence. When the noise drops, you can feel the subtle intelligence that lives in your breath, in your cells, in the moment itself. This reconnection grounds you. It brings back the sense that you're part of something larger than your worries. Stillness also trains humility. When you sit with yourself, you realize how often your ego jumps in with opinions, defenses, assumptions. Silence makes room for those voices to quiet, so a deeper, wiser presence can emerge. That presence isn't dramatic. It's steady, and once felt, it becomes your anchor. The beauty of intentional silence is that it meets you where you are. If you're overwhelmed, it soothes. If you're scattered, it focuses. If you're numb, it reconnects. But you must meet it halfway. You must choose to pause. Silence is not passive. It's active listening to life. It's deep presence. And presence sharpens awareness. You'll begin to see patterns you used to miss. You'll catch the emotion rising before it hijacks your mood. You'll sense what needs your attention and what can wait. You'll navigate complexity without panic. Because stillness builds capacity, not by giving you more energy, but by reducing unnecessary leaks. Your relationships improve too. When you've practiced silence internally, you no longer rush to fill external gaps. You become comfortable with pauses in conversation. You hold space without jumping to fix. People feel that. They trust it. You become a calm presence in a chaotic world. Stillness also strengthens decision-making. When your mind isn't reacting to everything, it can evaluate with clarity. You don't choose based on urgency. You choose based on alignment. This makes your choices feel lighter, cleaner, more sustainable. The reason most people don't experience this is because they've made stillness optional, something to do when time allows. But stillness is not luxury, it's maintenance, mental, emotional, even physical. It's the reset that allows the rest of your system to function as it should. Even your immune system responds to stillness. Chronic stress lowers your body's ability to repair. Restful silence reduces inflammation, balances hormones, and supports healing. Your biology thrives when you stop pushing and start listening. One practice that supports this is silent walks. No headphones, no podcast, just movement, breath, and presence. In these walks, your mind begins to sync with your body. You notice rhythm, sensation, texture. The world becomes richer, not because it changed, but because your awareness deepened. Another is intentional breathwork without sound. No music, no guidance, just awareness of inhale and exhale. This brings your attention into the present faster than thinking ever could. It's a reset button available at all times. The practice of stillness can also be paired with reflection. Writing down what surfaces during your silence. This is not journaling with prompts. It's listening with a pen, letting your subconscious speak. These entries often reveal what your thinking mind missed. Stillness is a teacher that doesn't lecture. It reveals. It doesn't push. It invites. It doesn't entertain. It awakens. And once you taste its depth, you begin to crave it. Not as escape, but as nourishment. In a world that rewards noise, choosing stillness is an act of rebellion, a quiet refusal to be ruled by urgency, a sacred pause that restores your access to what's real. And once you learn to access that depth within, you carry it everywhere, not just in meditation, but in meetings, in relationships, in conflict, in creativity, in moments when everything is moving fast. You stay rooted because you've trained for it. Stillness becomes your source, your compass, your edge, and in that silence, you meet a version of yourself that's not frantic, not fractured, not chasing, just whole and fully here. When you've trained your nervous system to find calm in stillness, you begin to notice what doesn't align. The noise, the rush, the automatic routines that used to feel normal now feel heavy. You start to see where your energy leaks, where your choices contradict your values, where your days pass without intention, What once looked like life is now exposed for what it really is, a pattern running without conscious input. This is the fork in the road between a lifestyle built by default and one built by design. Most people live by default. They wake up and follow a script they never wrote. Their routines are inherited. Their habits are automatic. Their goals are borrowed from social pressure. They react more than they create. Even their rest feels like an escape, not a recharge. They move through life like passengers in their own bodies, tired, disconnected, overwhelmed, and unsure why nothing changes. Default living feels safe because it's familiar, but it comes at a cost. That cost is clarity. That cost is purpose. That cost is your time being used for things that don't build you, and over years, that cost compounds into regret. Lifestyle by design flips the entire structure. It says, instead of living by reaction, you live by direction. It doesn't mean scheduling every moment or becoming rigid. It means pausing long enough to ask, does my life reflect my values? Does my calendar show what matters to me? Does my environment support who I want to be? The answers don't come from productivity hacks. They come from slowing down enough to look at your patterns with honest eyes. Design starts with awareness. The first layer of design is reclaiming your morning, not by copying someone else's routine, but by asking, what emotional state do I want to carry into my day? Then, choosing activities that anchor that state. That might mean waking up 15 minutes earlier to sit in quiet. It might mean moving your body, not for weight loss, but to generate momentum. It might mean writing one line in a journal, just to connect to your thoughts before the world floods your mind. What matters is not the routine itself, it's the energy it creates. A designed morning isn't perfect, it's purposeful. Next is how you use your time. In a default lifestyle, time is managed around urgency. What's due today? What's next on the list? What needs to be handled? That cycle creates tension and burnout. In a designed lifestyle, time is managed around alignment. You schedule what moves you forward, not just what keeps you afloat. You protect time for rest, not as a reward for exhaustion, but as a foundation for clarity. To make this real, look at your week, not at what's missing, but at what's automatic. Which habits are inherited? Which tasks bring life? Which ones drain it? Design means gently letting go of what no longer fits and replacing it with intention. Start with small adjustments. Replace a scroll break with a walk outside. Replace background noise with silence. Replace multitasking with single task focus. None of these are dramatic, but over time they create space. And space is what design needs. Your environment also matters. Default settings in your space will shape your behavior. If your phone is the first thing you see in the morning, distraction will lead your day. If your workspace is cluttered, your focus will fragment. If your fridge is filled with decisions that fight your goals, every meal becomes friction. Design means adjusting your space to reflect your desired identity. That might mean putting your journal beside your bed. That might mean moving your phone across the room. That might mean adding a plant or removing old reminders of who you used to be. These small cues signal your brain. We are building something new. Relationships are another key layer. In a default life, connections happen by proximity and history. You stay close to people because you always have. You give time to whoever demands it. You keep conversations on the surface to avoid discomfort. That model leads to disconnection and silent resentment. In a designed life, relationships are chosen with care. You spend time with people who energize you. You learn how to say no without guilt. You allow real conversation. You protect emotional boundaries. This doesn't require cutting everyone off. It requires clarity. Who supports your growth? Who honors your truth? Who drains your energy even when they mean well? Redesigning your connections doesn't mean judging others. It means loving yourself enough to choose what supports your evolution. Work is another major zone of design. In default mode, work is something you survive. You measure it by the paycheck or the approval it brings. You take what you're given and hope burnout doesn't win. But when you design your work, even inside constraints, you approach it differently. You start by asking, what strengths can I express more? What skills do I want to sharpen? What impact matters to me, even in small ways? You shape your role with intention, even if the job title stays the same. You communicate your needs. You craft projects that build your identity. You align your daily tasks with long-term direction, even if only slightly at first. Design doesn't always mean leaving everything behind. Often it means changing how you show up inside what you already have. Energy management is often ignored in lifestyle conversations, but it's one of the most powerful design tools. Most people design their day around time, but energy is what determines how you move through that time. Two people can have the same schedule and very different outcomes based on how they manage their energy. A designed lifestyle means checking in often. Noticing when your body needs movement, when your brain needs quiet, when your focus is peaking, when rest is required, not after crashing, but before. You begin to see patterns. You learn to ride the natural waves of energy instead of forcing through them. This also includes recovery, not just sleeping, but intentional recharge. That might be breathwork, meditation, music, solitude, nature. It might be laughter, journaling, art. What matters is that you design your recovery instead of waiting for burnout to demand it. Another area to address is consumption. What you read, watch, scroll through. In a default life, content is passive. You absorb whatever shows up. In a designed life, content is curated. You choose inputs that align with who you want to become. This shifts everything. Start by auditing your feed. Which accounts fuel growth? Which drain attention? Which trigger comparison? Which teach you something real? Apply the same lens to podcasts, shows, conversations. What you consume is shaping your thoughts more than you think. Designing your mental diet is an act of power. It tells your subconscious what's worth your focus. Over time, it rewires your beliefs, priorities, and mood. Financial design is another part often overlooked. Default spending reflects impulse. Designed spending reflects values. You don't need to be wealthy to be intentional. You need to know what matters. Every purchase is a vote for the life you're building. Every budget is a mirror of priorities. This doesn't mean strict control. It means clarity. You stop buying to escape. You start investing to expand. You spend less on numbing and more on growth. You redirect energy toward freedom, not just freedom from debt, but freedom of choice. Physical movement is also part of the equation. In a default lifestyle, exercise is punishment or obligation. In a designed lifestyle, movement becomes a way of reconnecting to power. You don't move to shrink your body. You move to wake it up, to listen to it, to build consistency and inner momentum. This might mean stretching daily, walking with awareness, lifting with presence, dancing without a goal. The design is not in the type of movement. It's in the relationship you build with your body through that movement. Your thoughts also require design. In a default mode, your inner dialogue follows old scripts. You react the same way to similar triggers. You repeat stories from your past. But when you begin to design your mindset, you intervene. You pause. You reframe. You choose thoughts that serve your vision, not your fear. This takes repetition. But every time you shift one thought from "I can't handle this" to "I'm growing through this," you strengthen a new path. Thought by thought, you redesign your perception. Spirituality, whether religious or not, also fits into lifestyle design. In a default life, you may feel disconnected from meaning, from rhythm, from depth. But when you create space for reflection, gratitude, awe, silence, you reconnect to what's beyond the surface. This could be morning prayer, evening reflection, breath rituals, time in nature. You design practices that remind you there is something deeper here. Life is not just tasks. There is beauty, mystery, grace. And in remembering that, you bring lightness to everything else. Designing your lifestyle is not about control. It's about creation. It's not about perfection. It's about alignment. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens decision by decision. Swap one habit. Shift one pattern. Reclaim one moment. These small moves create momentum. Eventually, your days begin to look different, not because you did everything right, but because you paid attention. You stepped off autopilot. You began to build, and with each new day, you refine. You move closer to a life that reflects your truth. A life that feels lived, not managed. A life where you don't just get through the week, you shape it with clarity, purpose, and presence. Once you begin to shape your life with intention, choosing how you spend your time, what you consume, and who you become, something subtle but powerful becomes clear. It's not just your habits that shape your experience. It's also the energy you carry and the energy you allow in. The best designed life still feels heavy if you're surrounded by emotional clutter. That's why clarity is not only about behavior, it's also about energetic hygiene. Your inner environment is affected by more than your actions. It's shaped by what you absorb, what you hold on to, and what you haven't cleared. Emotional residue can follow you from one interaction to the next, even if nothing visible happens. You may leave a conversation feeling drained without knowing why. You may feel heavy after scrolling for 10 minutes. You may wake up already tense because you went to sleep with unresolved emotion still lingering in your body. None of this is imaginary. Your nervous system is tracking everything, spoken and unspoken. Energetic hygiene means learning to notice this accumulation and choosing not to carry what isn't yours or what no longer serves you. Just as your physical body benefits from washing, your emotional body needs cleansing too. Otherwise, you end up walking through life covered in the emotional weight of everyone and everything around you. One of the most basic but overlooked forms of emotional hygiene is pausing after interactions. Most people jump from call to message to meeting without integration. Each exchange leaves behind a subtle imprint, an energy you carry forward if not processed. That's why even short breaks between tasks help reset your system. A few slow breaths, a quiet moment with eyes closed, or a physical movement like shaking out your arms sends a signal to your body. We're releasing what we don't need to carry forward. Awareness of emotional boundaries is another key. Just because someone shares their stress doesn't mean you have to absorb it. Empathy without boundaries leads to emotional fatigue. You start to think that helping others means holding their pain inside your own body. But being a safe space doesn't mean being a sponge. The line is thin, but it's real. You can care deeply without becoming heavy. One way to protect your energy is to visualize your boundary. It may sound abstract, but your mind responds to imagery. Before entering emotionally intense situations, take 5 seconds to imagine a clear line around you, a soft container that lets love and truth in, but keeps fear and projection out. This isn't magical thinking, it's intentional focus. It tells your system, I'm safe inside myself, and I don't need to merge with everything around me. It also helps to clarify where you give your energy. Not just in what you do, but in what you think about. Ruminating about what someone said 5 days ago is energy leakage. Rehearsing imaginary conversations is emotional noise. These habits become emotional clutter, background noise that blurs your focus and weakens your presence. One practice to cleanse this is containment. You create small mental rituals to close loops. For example, if you keep replaying something someone said, write it down, fold the paper, and set it aside. Your brain responds to symbolic closure. Even this simple act helps reduce obsessive loops. Another version is speaking out loud. This belongs to the past. I choose to return to the present. Your nervous system listens to your voice. Use it with care. Movement is also a powerful clearing tool. Emotions are stored in the body. When you feel stuck, anxious, or off-center, trying to think your way out often doesn't work. But moving your body, even for a few minutes, creates flow. Walking, stretching, dancing, or shaking are not just physical, they are energetic resets. You release tension through motion, not through over-analysis. Breathing techniques help too. Deep, intentional breath activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for calm and recovery. Short exhales signal stress. Long exhales signal safety. One effective practice is box breathing. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. Repeat for 2 to 5 minutes. This simple pattern stabilizes your emotional state and clears built-up stress. Sound can also shift your energetic field. Certain music, tones, or even silence can calm the mind and recalibrate the nervous system. When you feel emotionally congested, pay attention to what you're hearing. Your environment is speaking to your energy. Choose sounds that bring you back to center. The words you use matter too. Language has an energetic signature. Repeating phrases like, I'm so overwhelmed, or I can't do this, reinforces the feeling. But replacing them with phrases like, I can take one step, or I have handled hard things before, recalibrates your internal state. You're not denying what you feel, you're redirecting how you hold it. Another key practice is energetic discernment in conversations. Some people release their tension by unconsciously dumping it on others. They vent, complain, or seek validation without awareness. You don't have to block these people entirely, but you do need to learn how to stay rooted. One method is to silently affirm, I am grounded, I am listening, but I do not absorb. This keeps you engaged without becoming drained. It's also okay to exit emotionally chaotic spaces. You don't need to explain your boundaries in detail. Sometimes a simple, respectful exit protects your entire system. You're allowed to say, I'll continue this conversation later, or I need a moment to regroup. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cold, it keeps you clear. Sleep hygiene supports emotional cleansing as well. During sleep, your brain processes and sorts emotional data, but if you fall asleep with unresolved tension, especially from digital noise, your system struggles to reset. One method is to create a short wind-down ritual. That might be turning off screens 30 minutes before bed, journaling one line about what you're releasing, or doing a short breath practice. These acts may feel small, but they prime your brain for emotional restoration. Nature is one of the most powerful energy cleansers. Being outside, touching the ground, feeling the air, even looking at natural light recalibrates your entire system. These aren't luxuries, they are biological needs. When you feel energetically overloaded, step outside, take your shoes off, feel your breath in fresh air. You'll feel your body exhale in relief. The earth is designed to balance what the mind tries to carry alone. Water is another cleansing element. Taking a mindful shower, washing your hands slowly, or submerging in a bath are rituals that have physical and energetic effects. As you wash, set an intention. I release what is not mine. You're not just removing dirt, you're resetting your field. Digital energy is often the most subtle but most constant. Every message, notification, and feed update brings in information that affects your emotional state. If you start your day by checking your phone, you're letting the world set your frequency before you've had a chance to choose it. Reclaim your start. Even 5 minutes of quiet before exposure to screens can change your internal rhythm. Digital boundaries are essential. This includes muting people whose content disrupts your peace, deleting apps that create compulsive behavior, and choosing inputs that educate or inspire. One helpful habit is curating your digital space the same way you would your physical home. Ask, would I invite this into my room? If not, don't allow it into your mind. Regular reflection is another hygiene tool. At the end of the day, ask, what did I carry that wasn't mine? What emotions linger? What can I release? This small act of review prevents accumulation. You stop letting days pile up emotionally. You begin each morning lighter. Forgiveness, too, is a form of energetic release, not because you approve of what happened, but because you no longer want to hold its weight. Resentment is heavy. It drains you. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's choosing not to let the past poison your present. Sometimes this means forgiving yourself for staying too long, for not knowing better, for doing what you had to do to survive. That release makes room for renewal. Even your clothing can carry energy. The clothes you wore during stress or heartbreak may hold emotional memory. Washing them with intention or letting go of pieces that anchor you to the past is a quiet but powerful act of release. Your body feels what your mind doesn't always name. To maintain clear energy, you also need joy, play, laughter, creativity. These are not extras. They're resets. They return you to lightness. Design your life to include them, not as rewards, but as part of your baseline. This creates resilience. It gives your nervous system a reason to believe that life isn't just stress and effort. Protecting your energy isn't selfish. It's necessary. It allows you to show up fully without depletion. It ensures that your presence heals, not harms. It builds the capacity to love without losing yourself, to serve without self-erasure, to hold space for others without abandoning your own needs. Energetic hygiene isn't about isolation. It's about protection. It's not about avoidance. It's about discernment. It's about choosing what you allow into your field, how you process what enters, and what you intentionally release. In a world that constantly pulls at your attention, drains your focus, and amplifies urgency, your inner space must be guarded. Not with walls, but with wisdom. Not with force, but with clarity. And when you learn to cleanse, protect, and restore your energy consistently, you begin to feel different. Not just calmer, but lighter. Not just more focused, but more sovereign. That state of inner clarity becomes the foundation for every next step you take. And the version of you who walks from that place, grounded, clean, awake, is not easily shaken. Because they carry themselves with care, and that care reshapes everything. Once you begin to protect your emotional field and restore your inner space, something deeper becomes clear. Beneath the habits, the thoughts, the energy patterns, there is a story you've been living. Not one you consciously wrote, but one that's been shaping your choices, your self-concept, and even your limits for years. It's quiet, unspoken, and deeply personal. Yet it guides almost everything. This is your personal myth. Everyone has one. It's the internal narrative that explains who you are, what you're capable of, what you deserve, and where your life is going. It's shaped by early experiences, emotional wounds, cultural messaging, and patterns you've repeated so often, they've become your truth. But this myth, like any story, can be edited. It can be recast. It can be rewritten once you see it clearly. Most people never stop to examine the story they've been living. They accept it as reality. But stories are not facts. They are interpretations. And once you realize your mind has been scripting a version of your life that may no longer serve you, you gain the power to choose a different arc. The first step is to identify the dominant theme of your personal myth. This is not about what happened to you. It's about what you made those events mean. For some, the underlying story is, "I'm not enough." For others, it's, "Everyone leaves," or "I must prove my worth." These stories often develop early and become so familiar they blend into the background of your personality. But when you trace your recurring emotional patterns, you start to see the outline. Start by asking, what's the emotional thread that shows up when I'm triggered? What does my inner voice say when I'm scared, disappointed, or challenged? Is there a sentence that repeats in my head when things go wrong? These moments reveal the script. Once you have the story, you can begin to explore its characters. Just like in myths and epic tales, your internal world includes archetypes, recurring roles that shape how you respond to life. The hero, the victim, the rebel, the caretaker, the orphan, the saboteur. These are not labels, they are lenses. They help you see the energy you've been moving from. You may find that you've been living from the wounded child, always seeking safety, validation, or approval. Or the martyr, sacrificing your needs to be loved. Or the judge, constantly measuring your worth by impossible standards. These archetypes are not wrong. They develop to protect you. But they can also trap you in cycles that keep you from evolving. To shift the narrative, you need to first honor the old roles. They served a purpose. The inner critic helped you survive environments where mistakes weren't safe. The pleaser kept you connected when love felt conditional. Acknowledging their role lets you move beyond blame and into conscious choice. Then comes the rewrite. Every powerful myth includes a journey, one that begins with an old world and leads to a new one. Your current self stands at the threshold. The version of you shaped by old beliefs is ready to meet the version of you waiting to be born through change, and that change begins with a decision to step into a new narrative. To do this, define the version of you who leads the next chapter, not based on goals, but on inner qualities. Ask, who do I become when I'm no longer driven by fear? What does life look like when I trust myself fully? Which qualities have been waiting inside me, undeveloped, because the old story told me I wasn't allowed to live them? You might identify the sovereign, grounded, self-led, aligned, or the alchemist, turning pain into wisdom, or the warrior, courageous, resilient, clear. These are not fantasies. They are parts of you that have been waiting for permission to lead. Choose one. Begin to speak from that place. Act from that place. Make decisions from that place. At first, it may feel unfamiliar, but so did the old version when it began. Over time, this new identity becomes embodied. Every myth also includes an inner villain, an obstacle that blocks the journey. In your personal myth, these villains often take the form of internalized fear, shame, or doubt. You may feel like your villain is procrastination, self-sabotage, comparison, or a critical voice. But look closer. These are not the enemy. They are messengers. They point to where your healing still lives. Engage with them like allies in disguise. Ask, what does this pattern want to protect me from? What need is it trying to meet? You'll often find that even your most destructive habits are rooted in a desire for safety or love. Reframing the villain gives you power over it. You can also use symbolic rituals to mark the shift in narrative. Humans are wired for ceremony. It tells the subconscious, something has ended and something new begins. You might write a letter to the old version of yourself and burn it safely. You might create a symbol, an object, word, or image that represents your new role. You might declare your new story aloud. These acts are not dramatic gestures. They are anchors. They make the invisible shift real. Another way to shift your personal myth is to track your language. The words you use daily are the bricks of your inner world. Saying, "I always mess up," reinforces the victim myth. Saying, "I'm learning from this," activates the hero. Changing your narrative requires changing your narration. Pay close attention to the way you describe your life, even in casual conversation. Are you reinforcing an old script by telling stories of failure and limitation? Are you using humor to hide pain? Are you minimizing your growth to stay small? Every sentence is an invitation to either repeat or rewrite. Even your goals can reflect the old myth if you're not careful. Wanting success because you feel unworthy without it is not transformation. It's just the old wound wearing new clothes. But when your goals come from wholeness, they serve a different purpose. They become expressions of who you are, not attempts to prove who you are. Your environment also reinforces your myth. The books you read, the people you talk to, the media you consume, all of it mirrors the story you're living. If you want to change your narrative, surround yourself with people and messages that reflect your next chapter. Choose environments that support the archetype you're growing into. Another powerful practice is narrative journaling. Instead of writing about your life from the lens of struggle, write from the voice of your higher self. Retell past events with new meaning. Turn moments of failure into turning points. Recast heartbreak as the moment you began to return to yourself. This practice reshapes memory, and reshaped memory creates a new emotional map. Identity is not a single event. It's a story you tell over and over until it becomes the ground you walk on. When you tell it with intention, everything changes. The same circumstances become opportunities. The same traits become superpowers. The same triggers become training. Your personal myth is not fixed. You are not trapped by the script someone else handed you. You can choose to become the author. You can choose to write with compassion, depth, and clarity. You can choose a narrative that lifts instead of limits. And once you do, your life begins to follow that script. Because what the mind believes, the body follows. What the story tells, the soul begins to live. This is how people become new, not by escaping their past, but by retelling it from power, by choosing meaning over memory, by stepping into the role they were born to lead. And once you step into that role, you don't just live differently, you live mythically. After rewriting your personal myth, after seeing yourself through new eyes and choosing a story that empowers instead of limits, the next challenge isn't about effort, it's about release. This is the part that often feels hardest, because once you've done the work to clarify your direction, define your values, and reshape your identity, you're still faced with the unknown. And that's when a deeper truth begins to rise. Growth doesn't always come from holding on. Sometimes it arrives when you finally let go. This is the paradox of surrender. At first, surrender sounds like defeat, like giving up, like losing control. But true surrender is none of those things. It's the quiet strength that comes from stopping the fight against what is. It's the moment you stop resisting your reality and start flowing with it, not out of weakness, but from wisdom. Growth is often blocked not because you're not trying hard enough, but because you're trying to force a timeline, outcome, or identity that no longer fits. You think you need more discipline, more action, more control. But what you may actually need is space. Permission to stop gripping, to soften, to breathe without bracing for impact. Surrender is not passive, it's presence. It's choosing to meet life as it is, not as you wish it would be. It's no longer arguing with every detail. It's accepting this moment fully, so you can respond clearly instead of reacting blindly. That shift from resistance to acceptance is what unlocks the next phase of your evolution. Resistance comes in many forms. It can sound like frustration when things don't go your way. It can feel like tightness in your chest when you're trying to control how others see you. It can show up as anxiety when the path isn't clear, or as guilt when you're not moving fast enough. These are not just feelings, they're signs that your system is fighting reality. When you're in resistance, your nervous system stays in high alert. You grip tighter, overthink, and disconnect from your body. You say yes when you mean no. You chase what's leaving. You ignore your intuition because fear is louder. And over time, you burn out. Not from doing too much, but from carrying what isn't yours to control. Surrender interrupts that cycle. It's the decision to stop pushing the river and start trusting the current. Not blindly, not recklessly, but with grounded presence. You stop trying to force clarity and allow space for clarity to come. You stop pretending to know the outcome and start walking one step at a time with awareness. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care deeply, but you no longer use tension as your strategy. It means you trust that effort, without attachment, is more powerful than control based in fear. It means you give everything your full attention and then release the outcome. This is especially important when facing emotional pain. Most people resist their feelings. They try to fix, escape, suppress, or distract. But pain that isn't felt becomes tension. It hardens in the body. It leaks into thoughts. It shapes your identity. Surrender means feeling fully without judgment, meeting the discomfort without labeling it wrong, sitting with the storm without trying to outrun it. In that stillness, the emotion begins to shift, not because you forced it, but because you let it be. The energy you were using to resist is now free for healing. That's how you process emotion, not through willpower, but through presence, through allowing. The same is true for uncertainty. Life will never give you full answers in advance, and the mind will always want guarantees before it risks. But surrender means moving without all the answers, not with recklessness, but with trust. Trust in your ability to adapt, trust in your values to guide you, trust that clarity comes through motion, not waiting. This mindset changes your relationship to decisions. You stop obsessing over the perfect choice. You stop fearing mistakes. You start listening to what feels aligned, even if it's unclear where it will lead. That doesn't mean being impulsive. It means being open to being surprised, open to changing course, open to letting life participate in your growth. Another place where surrender brings power is in relationships. When you hold tightly to being right, to changing others, to protecting an image, you create conflict, even if your intentions are good. But when you surrender the need to control how you're perceived, you show up more authentically. You communicate with less fear. You listen with fewer assumptions. You let people be who they are, not who you want them to be. That creates space for real connection. Even in creative work, surrender matters. When you're too attached to the outcome, how it's received, how it performs, how it compares, you create from tension. You stifle flow. But when you let go of outcome and create from alignment, something deeper moves through you. You're no longer trying to prove. You're expressing something honest. That honesty has a resonance no strategy can replace. In spiritual practice, surrender is essential, not as blind belief, but as humility. You realize that your control has limits, that there's intelligence beyond your mind, that some answers come through silence, not seeking. This doesn't remove your responsibility, it amplifies your awareness. You learn to discern what's yours to carry and what's not. This distinction changes everything. You stop gripping at things you were never meant to hold. Other people's reactions, the future's exact form, past events that can't be changed. You take full responsibility for your choices and release the rest. Practicing surrender doesn't require dramatic gestures. It starts with small shifts. When a plan falls apart, instead of spiraling, you pause. You say, "This is not what I expected, but I will stay present." When you feel urgency, you ask, "Is this urgency real or fear trying to rush me?" When you don't know what to do, you choose stillness over panic. That stillness is not inaction, it's alignment. Over time, these moments retrain your nervous system. You stop equating control with safety. You begin to feel the difference between real power and reactive force. Power is quiet, rooted. It doesn't chase. It doesn't grasp. It moves with clarity, not desperation. Surrender also creates space for intuition. When you stop over-managing every detail, you begin to feel subtle pulls, a yes that rises without explanation, a no that settles in your chest, a decision that clicks even if it doesn't make logical sense yet. That's not guesswork. That's embodied wisdom, and you can't hear it if your mind is always louder than your body. Letting go also reveals your deeper values. When you stop chasing status, image, or approval, you uncover what really drives you. And often, it's not what you thought. You may discover that you don't want more. You want meaning. You don't want control. You want peace. You don't want to win. You want to belong to yourself. This clarity allows you to set cleaner boundaries. When you surrender the need to be liked by everyone, you start choosing relationships that feel honest, not just comfortable. When you surrender the need to fix everything, you start trusting others to walk their path. When you surrender the need to be perfect, you begin to show up with more love and less fear. Even your relationship with time changes. In resistance, everything feels urgent. You're always behind, always trying to catch up. But in surrender, you begin to move from rhythm, not rush. You respect timing without forcing it. You take action without attachment, and because of that, your decisions become clearer, your body becomes lighter, and your presence becomes stronger. This is not about giving up. It's about giving in to a deeper intelligence, a quieter wisdom, a more stable truth. It's about allowing life to move through you rather than trying to push your way through life. That shift brings unexpected growth. Because when you're not wasting energy on resistance, you're free to invest it in alignment. You become more adaptive, more intuitive, more peaceful, not because life got easier, but because your relationship to life became wiser. The paradox is clear. When you stop gripping, things often start to flow. When you stop forcing, opportunities begin to open. When you stop chasing, what's meant for you finds its way to you. Not always on your timeline, but always with a depth you couldn't plan. So let surrender be a practice, not a moment. Let it show up in how you breathe, how you choose, how you listen, and how you let go. Let it remind you that real strength is not in control, it's in trust. And real growth doesn't come from tightening, it comes from releasing, from softening, from staying open to what's next. That's not giving up. That's stepping into a deeper way of becoming. After learning how surrender can accelerate your growth, lighten your internal load, and bring clarity through trust rather than control, you begin to notice what's been quietly steering your choices all along. It's not always your logic, it's not your schedule, and it's definitely not your goals written in a journal. It's your emotions, specifically the few that rise up most often and sit closest to your core. These are your keystone emotions. A keystone emotion is not just something you feel regularly. It's the emotional undercurrent that guides the tone of your inner voice, shapes your response to challenges, and often decides how you react before your thoughts even catch up. You could call it your emotional center of gravity. And if you don't know what yours are, you'll keep repeating patterns that don't match who you want to become, without understanding why. Every person has one or two dominant emotional filters that shape how they see the world. For some, it's fear. For others, it's guilt. Some live through the lens of resentment. Others, through pressure or urgency. These feelings aren't constant, but they show up often, especially during stress, decision-making, or transition. The first step is to identify yours. This isn't about guessing, it's about observing. Start with your daily emotional patterns. What emotion rises first in conflict? What do you feel when someone challenges you, when you're alone with your thoughts? What emotional tone does your inner dialogue carry most often? If fear is your keystone emotion, you'll notice a tendency to overthink, to hesitate, to play small. You might spend a lot of time scanning for what could go wrong. You may feel uneasy when things are calm, because part of you is always preparing for loss or failure. This doesn't mean you're broken. It means fear has become your default lens. If guilt is central for you, your decisions may be driven by what others need rather than what's true for you. You'll feel uneasy when saying no. You'll take on emotional labor to keep the peace. You'll often question if you're doing enough, even when you're exhausted. Guilt makes it hard to rest without justification. For those with anger or resentment as a core emotion, there may be a story of betrayal or injustice that hasn't been fully processed. You may carry a sense of being wronged or overlooked. You might find yourself easily triggered by other people's behavior, interpreting things through a lens of disrespect or unfairness. This emotion gives strength, but it also blocks vulnerability and connection when it goes unexamined. Some people are shaped by a deep current of shame. This shows up as harsh self-criticism, difficulty accepting praise, and an internal narrative that you're never quite enough. Even small mistakes feel personal. Shame-based decisions tend to limit expression, visibility, and joy. There are others who live through pressure, a constant need to be productive, effective, in control. Rest feels unsafe. Pausing feels like failure. If something isn't moving forward, it feels like something is wrong. This emotional pattern is often mistaken for drive, but it's actually anxiety in disguise. Once you know which emotion dominates your lens, you can begin to work with it, not to get rid of it, but to transform its influence. Emotions are not the enemy. They are messengers. And when you learn to understand their purpose, they stop controlling you and start guiding you. To begin redirecting a keystone emotion, you first need to normalize it. Instead of labeling it wrong or weak, you acknowledge its purpose. Fear was meant to protect you. Guilt was meant to keep you connected. Anger was meant to defend your boundaries. Shame was meant to help you reflect. Pressure was meant to help you perform. But when these emotions become the default response to everything, they shift from helpers to hijackers. The practice is not to suppress these emotions, but to soften the grip they have on your identity. That starts with pattern recognition. When fear shows up, you pause and say, "This is fear trying to protect me. What would I choose if I trusted myself instead?" When guilt rises after setting a boundary, you say, "This is guilt trying to keep me connected, but I can care for others without abandoning myself." When pressure tries to rush you, you say, "This is pressure trying to create progress, but slowness doesn't mean failure." You begin to create internal space between the feeling and the response. That space is where transformation happens. Another tool is emotional reframing. This means identifying what your keystone emotion is trying to prevent and replacing it with what you want to experience instead. If fear is trying to prevent failure, what you may truly want is courage. If guilt is trying to prevent disconnection, what you may truly want is honest intimacy. If shame is trying to prevent rejection, what you may truly want is self-acceptance. Once you know the real desire underneath the emotion, you can begin to practice behaviors that reinforce that new emotional tone. This doesn't happen in big dramatic steps. It happens in small, consistent actions. If courage is your new direction, it looks like speaking when you usually stay silent, trying something imperfectly, making a decision without knowing how it ends. If honesty is your new direction, it looks like saying no without apology, expressing needs without editing. allowing discomfort without running. If self-acceptance is your new direction, it looks like resting without guilt, celebrating small wins, saying, "I'm proud of how I showed up today, even when it wasn't perfect." The emotional tone of your life doesn't change in theory. It changes in repetition. You also need to track your energy. Keystone emotions live in the body. They create postures, breathing patterns, even tones of voice. Fear tightens the chest. Guilt slumps the shoulders. Pressure shortens the breath. Shame lowers the gaze. Resentment hardens the jaw. Start checking in with your body during the day. Ask, "What am I holding?" Then move. Stand up, breathe deeply, roll your shoulders, shake out your limbs. These physical resets help release the emotional grip so that your choices come from presence, not pattern. Another powerful step is updating your inner language. Keystone emotions have signature phrases. Fear says, "What if I fail?" Guilt says, "I shouldn't have said that." Shame says, "I'm not good enough." Pressure says, "It's never enough." Resentment says, "They always do this to me." Once you recognize these phrases, you can replace them. Not with denial, but with truth. Fear becomes, "I've done hard things before." Guilt becomes, "I can care for others without losing myself." Shame becomes, "I am allowed to be human." Pressure becomes, "Progress matters more than pace." Resentment becomes, "I choose how I respond, not how they act." This conscious redirection reshapes your internal dialogue. And as the dialogue shifts, so does your behavior. Your nervous system starts to feel safer making new choices because it's no longer bracing for old outcomes. Supportive rituals can also reinforce this work. A daily check-in with your emotional state. Writing out what emotion led your decisions that day. A grounding routine that signals your system. We are choosing differently now. These don't need to be elaborate. Simplicity makes them sustainable. Surrounding yourself with others who reflect your desired emotional tone is another layer. If your keystone emotion is fear and everyone around you is always anxious, it's harder to grow. But if you place yourself in spaces where people move with trust, take aligned risks, or express their truth with confidence, your system starts to mirror that possibility. Books, conversations, environments, all of these contribute to your emotional rhythm. Choose them with care. This is not a quick fix, it's a re-anchoring. But over time, you start to notice that your keystone emotion is no longer leading every choice. You begin to act from a different place, a grounded place, a place that allows you to expand without always protecting. You don't lose the old emotion. You just stop letting it be the author of your life. You begin to lead with presence, not with protection. You start making decisions from who you're becoming, not from who you had to be to survive. And in that shift, something powerful happens. You realize you're not at the mercy of your feelings. You are the builder of your emotional foundation. And from that foundation, you can grow with strength, clarity, and freedom. Every choice you make from this place rewrites your reality, not because circumstances changed, but because you did. Once you begin to recognize the emotional forces that have shaped your reality, and you shift toward grounding your choices in clarity rather than old patterns, a new question naturally surfaces. If I'm no longer being ruled by fear, guilt, or pressure, then what do I listen to now? The answer lies in a deeper signal you've carried all along, subtle, persistent, often ignored. It doesn't shout or beg for attention. It whispers with certainty. It nudges, pulls, pauses, and it has always known the next step. That signal is your intuition. Most people have been taught to distrust this part of themselves. From an early age, we're taught to obey logic, follow rules, and wait for permission. We learn to value external proof over internal knowing. But the more you silence your intuition, the harder it becomes to recognize. And yet, it never disappears. It waits, quietly, patiently, for you to start listening again. Intuition is not magic. It's pattern recognition, embodied awareness, emotional wisdom, and subconscious data working together faster than your conscious mind can explain. It's the part of you that senses before it analyzes, that feels truth before it's verbalized, and when developed, it becomes your most reliable compass, especially in moments where logic falls short. To rebuild trust in this inner guide, you start by reconnecting with your body. Intuition speaks through physical sensation. You might feel a contraction in your chest when something's off, or a lightness in your belly when something's right. The signals vary from person to person, but they are consistent once recognized. Begin to track your responses, not your thoughts, your sensations. When faced with a decision, pause. Ask, where do I feel this in my body? Tension often signals resistance. Expansion points toward alignment. This practice shifts your attention from the mind's noise to the body's signal. The more you tune in, the louder it becomes. Another way to sharpen intuition is through sensory awareness. The more you engage fully with your surroundings, the more your nervous system calms and the more perceptive you become. Practice being fully present with ordinary experiences, eating slowly, noticing sounds, feeling texture. This depth of presence builds the sensitivity needed to catch intuitive cues before the mind overrides them. Silence is essential. Not just the absence of noise, but the space between thoughts. Intuition rises when you're not distracted. When you allow mental stillness, insight emerges without effort. Meditative practices, slow breathing, or quiet solo walks can create the space for intuition to surface. Not as a dramatic answer, but as a steady direction. To test intuition, start with low-stakes decisions. Which route to take home, which book to pick up, who to reach out to. Pause and feel into the choice, then act on it without second-guessing. This builds confidence. Over time, graduate to more complex choices. Pay attention not just to the result, but to how you felt before and after acting on your inner signal. This helps you distinguish intuition from fear or habit. Intuition also thrives on integrity. When your words, actions, and values align, your internal system becomes clear. You're less likely to mistake emotional reactivity for guidance. But when you compromise your truth repeatedly, your signal becomes distorted. Clarity requires congruence. The more honest you are with yourself, the cleaner your intuitive channel becomes. One of the most common blocks to intuition is overthinking. The mind wants certainty. It wants to analyze and predict. But intuition works outside of time. It doesn't always explain itself in neat logic. It's non-linear. To work with it, you must tolerate uncertainty. You must allow a direction to feel right before you can explain why. That discomfort is part of the process. Another practice is intuitive writing. Set a timer for 5 to 10 minutes. Ask a question, then write without editing or censoring. Let your hand move faster than your doubt. Often, insights emerge that you didn't expect, truths your conscious mind hasn't yet processed. This method trains you to trust what arises without needing full validation first. It's also helpful to review your life through the lens of intuition. Reflect on the times you knew something before you had evidence, a gut feeling about a person, a sense that it was time to leave, a moment you said yes or no without explanation, and it changed everything. These memories reinforce that your inner compass has always been there, even when you didn't recognize it. To build deeper trust, stop labeling intuition as irrational. What feels like a hunch is often your subconscious processing complex inputs beyond your awareness. You don't need to explain every inner knowing. You just need to notice when it shows up and begin to respond with trust instead of doubt. You can also strengthen your intuitive sense by clearing emotional residue. When you're weighed down by past emotion, your signal gets buried under reactive noise. Practices like breathwork, somatic release, and deep emotional processing make space for cleaner perception. A lighter system is more sensitive and therefore more intuitive. Be mindful of overstimulation. Excessive digital input, noise, or multitasking dulls sensitivity. It pulls your awareness outward, away from the quiet knowing inside. Choose times each day to unplug, to slow down, to be with your own thoughts. These pauses are not luxuries, they're how you recalibrate your signal. One advanced practice is intuitive anticipation. Before entering a conversation or event, pause and ask yourself what you sense. Not what you expect, but what you feel. Where is your energy being pulled? What are you being asked to notice? When you enter the space, compare your feeling to what unfolds. This sharpens your ability to perceive subtle cues before they become obvious. Another way to cultivate intuition is through symbolic awareness. Intuition often speaks through patterns, metaphors, or repeated signs. Pay attention to what keeps showing up. Dreams, phrases, numbers, images. These can be ways your subconscious sends messages. They're not always literal, but when paired with presence and reflection, they offer insight. Make space for daydreaming and non-linear thought. The most creative insights often arrive when your mind is at ease. Let yourself drift, doodle, stare out the window. These seemingly idle moments are where your intuitive brain connects, dots your logical mind hasn't yet noticed. Inner conflict is another portal for intuitive growth. When part of you feels one thing and another part resists, intuition is often caught in the tension. Sit with both voices. Let them speak without interruption. Then ask, which part feels rooted in fear? Which part feels like love? The answer often lies in which one makes you feel more whole, not more comfortable. Developing intuitive confidence also means accepting that others won't always understand your choices. Intuition sometimes asks you to move before the path is visible. Others may question, criticize, or try to redirect you. Trusting yourself in these moments is part of the work. You're not proving anything, you're staying true to your own alignment. You don't need to be right all the time. That's not the goal. The goal is congruence. Acting from a place that feels steady, even when the world feels unsure. That steadiness builds over time as you collect evidence that your inner compass is trustworthy, not because it always leads to easy outcomes, but because it always leads you closer to truth. Be patient with the process. Intuition isn't a light switch. It's a relationship. It deepens through attention, respect, and practice. It reveals more when you respond with care rather than urgency. As you build that relationship, you begin to live from a different place. You make choices faster, with less fear and more clarity. You recover from doubt quicker. You know when to move and when to wait. You feel the difference between emotional reaction and intuitive knowing. Over time, your life begins to reflect that knowing. You align your time, your relationships, your projects with what feels true, not just what looks good. You stop chasing approval. You stop over-explaining. You start following an inner rhythm that makes your path unmistakably yours. This is the path of someone who no longer needs constant outside input to trust their next step. This is what it means to lead yourself, quietly, powerfully, from the inside out. Once you begin following your own inner compass, instead of reacting to noise or pressure, a powerful shift happens. You make better decisions, feel more aligned, and start trusting your direction. But even with intuition guiding you, there's one resource that keeps slipping through your hands if you're not fully aware of how it works. Not energy, not clarity, time. You can feel aligned, grounded, and focused, and still feel like you're running out of time. That's because the problem isn't just how you spend time, it's how you relate to it. Most people don't have a time problem. They have a control problem. They've given their schedule, attention, and energy away to systems that were never designed to protect them. And this is where the real shift begins, from time scarcity to time sovereignty. Time scarcity is not just a scheduling issue. It's a belief system. It tells you there's never enough, that if you don't rush, you'll fall behind, that you have to constantly manage, multitask, optimize, or you'll be buried. This mindset trains your nervous system to live in stress, even when nothing urgent is happening. You stop breathing deeply. You say yes to things you don't mean. You cram more into every hour. But no matter how efficient you become, it never feels like enough. Time sovereignty works differently. It's not about fitting more in. It's about deciding what actually belongs. It's the mindset that says, I am the architect of how my hours feel. I choose how I shape my attention. I don't serve the clock. I use it to support my rhythm. The first major shift is from urgency to clarity. Time scarcity is full of false fires. Every message feels like a crisis. Every notification is an alarm. But when you look closely, most of these signals are not urgent. They're simply loud. Sovereignty means learning to separate importance from noise. You ask, what actually moves my life forward? What supports my peace, my purpose, or my people? What can wait, even if it's loud? To apply this practically, begin by identifying your top non-negotiables, the few priorities that matter most right now. Then ask if your current schedule reflects them. Time scarcity fills your day with what's immediate. Time sovereignty protects space for what's essential. This might mean blocking time for silence, for movement, for deep work, for connection. And just as importantly, it means removing the things that erode those blocks, like fragmented tasks, reaction-based checking, and multitasking that leaves you scattered. Another shift comes from rethinking how you measure time. Scarcity measures time in hours and tasks. Sovereignty measures it in depth and intention. You can spend 2 hours on something and still feel behind if your mind was split. But you can spend 20 focused minutes and feel complete. So stop judging success by duration. Begin measuring by presence. Ask, did I give this moment my full attention? Did I move something forward that mattered? That changes how time feels. Energy rhythm matters too. Time scarcity assumes every hour is equal, but not all hours have the same weight. Your body, brain, and creative flow move in cycles. Sovereignty means noticing those patterns and aligning your most important tasks with your peak states. That could be morning for some, evening for others. It means placing creative work during high-focus windows and putting shallow tasks in low-focus periods. This way, you stop fighting your rhythm and start designing around it. You also gain power by using time containers. Instead of letting tasks bleed endlessly, give them limits. Not to rush, but to contain your energy. For example, instead of work on this all day, try focus deeply on this for 90 minutes, then pause. Boundaries sharpen attention. Deadlines create structure. And when you add intentional breaks in between, your mind resets. You reclaim focus and reduce burnout. One overlooked practice is time breathing. This means creating space between transitions. Most people jump from one task to another without pause. Meetings blend into emails, work slides into home life, but those gaps matter. A few minutes of silence between roles can shift your energy completely. Use those moments to reset, not with stimulation, but with presence. Close your eyes. Breathe slowly. Ask, what energy do I want to bring into what's next? That single question can change how your entire day feels. Decision fatigue drains time. Every choice you make, what to eat, when to respond, how to phrase something, costs mental energy. Sovereignty means reducing low-impact decisions so you can focus on high-impact ones. This doesn't mean living rigidly. It means designing supportive defaults. Pre-decide your morning routine. Create systems for common tasks. Automate what you can. The goal isn't to remove flexibility, it's to reduce clutter. Technology plays a huge role. Time scarcity feeds on constant input. Sovereignty means designing your digital life with discipline. Remove notifications that don't require action. Turn off non-essential alerts. Schedule screen-free blocks. Use your phone consciously, not reactively. You don't need to quit tech. You need to become its master. Another level of time sovereignty is owning your calendar. Most people treat their calendar like a to-do list, but your calendar should reflect your priorities, not your panic. Start blocking time for your deep work before scheduling meetings. Set appointments with yourself for rest, for creation, for planning. Treat these like real commitments, because they are. You are the most important meeting on your calendar. Collaboration must be filtered too. Just because someone sends a request doesn't mean it fits your focus. Learn to pause before agreeing. You don't need to respond instantly. Sovereignty means asking, does this align with what matters now? If yes, when can I do it without compromising what's already essential? If no, how can I say that clearly and respectfully? The way you start and end your day also impacts time perception. Mornings rushed with urgency train your brain to feel behind all day. But if you start with presence, even for 10 minutes, you set a calmer rhythm. Similarly, ending your day with reflection closes loops. Ask, what did I complete? What will I carry into tomorrow with intention? This simple practice reduces mental residue and prepares you for deeper rest. Creative time requires a different kind of protection. In scarcity mode, creativity is the first thing to go. It feels non-essential. But your ideas, your problem-solving, your expression, they all require time that's open, unstructured, and free from judgment. Sovereignty means guarding that space like treasure. Even 30 minutes of protected creative flow each day rewires how your mind works. The same goes for recovery. Scarcity teaches you to rest only after finishing everything. Sovereignty teaches you to rest in order to finish what matters with quality. Recovery isn't weakness, it's maintenance. Physical rest, mental stillness, and emotional regulation all protect your capacity. Design these into your week intentionally, not as reaction, but as rhythm. Learning how to exit urgency loops is another core skill. When you feel like you're always behind, stop and ask, who told me I'm supposed to be moving faster? Is this pace actually mine or inherited from comparison, culture, or pressure? Slowing down doesn't mean falling behind. It means moving on purpose. It's also helpful to review your week through a sovereign lens. Look back and ask, where did I give time away unconsciously? What part of my week felt aligned? What do I want more of next week? This review builds awareness without shame. It's not about perfection, it's about pattern recognition. Sometimes time scarcity hides under guilt. The guilt of doing nothing, the guilt of slowing down, the guilt of not producing. But that guilt is often internalized noise, not truth. Your worth is not tied to your output. Sovereignty means rewriting that belief. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to create space. You are allowed to live without proving. You also build sovereignty by aligning long-term vision with daily action. Ask yourself, where do I want to be a year from now? Not in status, but in quality of life. Then reverse engineer your schedule. Does how you spend today support that direction? If not, what's one small shift that would? Sovereignty is built in the present, but guided by the future. Community plays a role too. Surrounding yourself with others who value alignment over hustle helps reinforce your rhythm. When your circle respects boundaries, honors rest, and encourages depth, it becomes easier to protect your own focus. You stop feeling like the odd one for choosing calm. You feel supported instead. Language matters. Start speaking differently about time. Instead of, I don't have time, say, that's not a priority right now. Instead of, I'm too busy, say, I'm choosing to focus on what matters. These small changes help reclaim agency. They remind you that time isn't something you manage, it's something you direct, with choice, clarity, and consistency. Even boredom can be a tool. In a culture of constant stimulation, letting yourself be bored invites your mind to slow down, to create, to reset. Boredom is not wasted time. It's empty space that opens up intuition and insight. Build white space into your life, not just for rest, but for emergence. Over time, these small changes add up. You stop waking up in reaction. You begin to feel your days expanding, even if your schedule looks the same. You move from always catching up to feeling anchored. You become less scattered and more strategic, less rushed and more rhythmic. You stop measuring time by how much you squeezed in and start measuring it by how much presence you brought. This is time sovereignty. It's not about controlling the clock. It's about designing your hours so that they serve your truth, so that your days reflect what matters, so that your life becomes a reflection of choice, not default. And the person who lives that way doesn't just feel less busy, they feel more free, because they've remembered something most people forget. Time is not just something you spend, it's something you shape. Once you reclaim authority over your time, choosing presence over pressure and clarity over urgency, you naturally begin to notice something else waiting quietly beneath the surface. Even with aligned actions, intuitive decisions, and structured energy, part of you still feels tied to an older version of who you used to be. Not because you want to stay there, but because identity tends to leave traces. And those traces, if left untouched, quietly shape how much of your new life you'll allow yourself to step into. That's why real transformation asks for more than behavior change. It asks for symbolic closure. A clear, felt moment when you say, "That chapter is done, and I'm stepping into something new." This is where the power of ritual becomes essential, not in a religious sense, but in a psychological one. Ritual creates a bridge between who you were and who you're becoming. We are meaning-driven beings. Our minds don't just need change, they need markers of change. Without a signal, the nervous system often clings to the familiar. It assumes you're still living in the past because no clear boundary was drawn between then and now. Ritual is how you create that boundary. It's how you tell your system, "We've shifted. We are allowed to live differently now." Ritual doesn't need to be grand or complicated. Its power comes from intention and repetition. A symbolic act done with full awareness has more impact than 100 unconscious routines. To create a ritual of self-renewal, begin by identifying what you're ready to release, not as a vague feeling, but as a specific identity or pattern. It might be an outdated belief, a role you've outgrown, or a behavior that no longer reflects your truth. Name it clearly. Write it down. Give it language. This brings it out of the fog and into focus. Then ask yourself what version of you it kept alive. For example, if you're letting go of over-pleasing, you might be releasing the version of you that believed love had to be earned. If you're letting go of avoidance, you're releasing the version of you that thought emotions were dangerous. Seeing the connection helps you honor why the pattern existed before you choose to release it. Next comes the symbolic act. This is where intention becomes embodied. Fire, water, movement, sound, and silence can all be used. You might burn a letter to your old self. You might bury something that represented your former identity. You might cut a piece of string to represent freedom from a past belief. You might take a cold shower, letting each drop wash away what's no longer yours. You don't need to follow anyone else's blueprint. The most powerful rituals are the ones that feel personal. What matters is not what it looks like. It's how fully present you are when doing it. After the release comes the declaration, a spoken or written intention for the new phase you're stepping into. It doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be true. You might say, "I no longer lead with fear. I now move with clarity." Or, "I release the weight of proving. I now stand in my own enoughness." These phrases aren't affirmations, they're declarations, spoken commitments to a new identity. Once declared, seal it with a gesture. Lighting a candle, taking a deep breath, placing your hand on your heart. The body remembers what words sometimes forget. These small actions turn the internal decision into something the body can feel and recall later. Rituals are even more powerful when repeated. Transformation doesn't happen in one burst, it unfolds in layers. Create periodic reset points, monthly, seasonally, yearly. These become built-in checkpoints where you reflect, reset, and realign. You don't wait for breakdowns to shift. You proactively renew before things get muddy. You can also pair rituals with transitions, the end of a relationship, the start of a project, the change of a season. These moments are invitations to pause and choose how you'll carry your energy forward. Instead of rushing into the next phase, you integrate what you've learned, release what no longer fits, and name what you're stepping into. Movement can be a central part of ritual. Walking, dancing, stretching, or even standing still with deep breath, when done intentionally, signals to the nervous system that something new is being embodied. It breaks the stagnation that often holds people in emotional limbo. You're not just thinking differently, you're moving differently. That's when real change becomes sustainable. Journaling can be woven into ritual as a companion tool. Writing offers clarity. When you write from the voice of the version you're becoming, you reinforce that identity. Try journaling from the future. This is how I now live. This is how I now think. This is how I now respond. These pages become mirrors that show you the shape of your new life. Ritual also restores your sense of power. In a world that often teaches you to wait for permission, to change, to heal, to move forward, ritual says, I decide now. You no longer wait for external validation. You give yourself the authority to grow. Another powerful use of ritual is emotional cleansing. When you carry unresolved energy from a conversation, loss, or confrontation, it often lingers in your system. Instead of holding it in or venting aimlessly, create a ritual to move it through. That might mean screaming into a pillow, crying to music, writing and tearing up a page. These acts give the emotion form, and once expressed, it loses its grip. If you work with creative projects, you can design rituals to begin and end your work sessions. A simple phrase, a breath, a clearing gesture can signal your brain. Now we create. This increases focus and reduces resistance. And when the session ends, a closing ritual brings closure, preventing creative residue from leaking into your personal life. You can also use rituals to reinforce boundaries. For example, after finishing work, you might close your laptop, light incense, or wash your hands slowly. This tells your body, we are now leaving work mode. You begin to control the energetic bleed that often happens when roles overlap. Rituals can be private or shared. When done in community, with trusted friends, a partner, or a small group, they amplify belonging. You witness each other's growth. You hold space for truth without judgment. Group rituals create accountability. They remind you that transformation is both personal and relational. Nature can also anchor rituals. Standing barefoot on the ground, watching the sunset in silence, throwing a stone into water while releasing a thought. Nature holds memory. It reflects the cycle of renewal. Aligning your practices with natural rhythms connects your transformation to something older than your fears. Sound is another key element. You might use music, chanting, humming, or even complete silence. Sound bypasses logic. It accesses emotion directly. When paired with breath, it can reset your entire state. Even one deep exhale with sound can create release. Colors, textures, scents, these sensory elements can be infused into your ritual space, not to make things performative, but to signal intention. Your senses are tools. Use them to create environments that support your shifts. Ritual also helps with grief. Whether grieving a person, a version of yourself, or a lost opportunity, rituals give you a way to honor what mattered while letting go. You're not pretending it didn't affect you. You're making space for its impact and then choosing to continue. You might create a small altar with meaningful items. You might write a goodbye letter. You might plant something, symbolizing what's ending and what will grow next. These acts don't erase pain. They give it form so it doesn't stay trapped inside. Your ritual practice doesn't need to be daily to be powerful. What matters is consistency. What matters is depth. Choose practices that feel like truth, not performance. Let them evolve as you do. Keep them simple enough that they don't become another task, but meaningful enough that they create shift. Over time, you'll notice that the more you ritualize your transitions, the more gracefully you move through change. You no longer fear reinvention. You expect it. You prepare for it. You honor it. You begin to live with the understanding that identity is not fixed. It's shaped and reshaped by how willing you are to release what's outdated. And when you do, something shifts, not just in your behavior, but in your entire presence. You walk lighter, you speak more clearly, you rest without guilt, you create without fear, because the parts of you that needed to be honored were finally seen. The stories that needed to end were given closure. And the version of you that was waiting quietly in the wings, they were finally invited to step forward and lead. Once you begin to use rituals to release old versions of yourself and consciously step into the new, you start to feel more whole. Your body listens, your choices sharpen, your path opens. But even with all that inner work, there's something that keeps pulling at your energy in subtle ways. Something you didn't choose, but interacts with you every single day. It's not your family. It's not your memories. It's your digital environment. Your personality, attention, emotions, and even desires are being shaped by algorithms. Quietly, constantly, and often without your awareness. What you see, what you scroll, what you engage with, is being selected for you based on systems designed not to elevate you, but to keep you hooked. These are the invisible influences. And no matter how self-aware you become, if your digital space remains toxic, cluttered, or manipulative, you will unconsciously adopt beliefs, patterns, and values that were never yours to begin with. That's why this part of the journey requires a deep audit and intentional reset of your online world. It starts with awareness. Every time you open an app, refresh a page, or swipe through content, you're interacting with a system that has one purpose: to capture and extend your attention. That means the loudest, most emotionally charged, most addictive content rises to the top. Not the most true, not the most aligned, the most engaging. Over time, this changes how you think. Your nervous system gets trained to crave speed, novelty, outrage, comparison, and distraction. You stop thinking slowly. You stop tolerating silence. You lose the patience to reflect. Even your thoughts begin to shorten. And before you realize it, your values are being influenced not by choice, but by exposure. This doesn't mean technology is the enemy, but it does mean you need to become more powerful than the algorithm. To do that, you must reclaim your digital diet with the same care you'd use to clean your physical space or choose the food you eat. Start with a personal feed audit. Look through every social platform and ask a few key questions about the accounts you follow. Does this person or page elevate me? Do I leave feeling calm, focused, or inspired? Or do I feel triggered, insecure, agitated, or numb? If the answer is the latter, that's not just bad content. It's toxic programming. Unfollow generously, curate ruthlessly. Don't just filter for information, filter for energy. You are not obligated to consume the thoughts of people who live in fear, projection, or performance. You get to choose what fills your screen, and therefore what shapes your internal environment. Next, audit your notification settings. Every ping is a hook. Every vibration is a claim on your nervous system. Turn off anything that isn't essential. This gives you back control over when and how you interact. You stop living in reaction and start responding on your own time. Then examine your input rhythms. Most people consume information before they've even accessed their own thoughts for the day. Scrolling first thing in the morning puts you in a reactive state immediately. Instead, protect the first minutes of your day. Let them be your own. Even 10 minutes of silence, reflection, or movement before touching a screen helps restore your baseline. Now, look at your consumption cycles. How often do you refresh, scroll, check, bounce between tabs? These micro habits splinter your attention. They train your brain to expect interruption. The solution isn't more willpower, it's creating barriers. Use website blockers if needed. Set time limits. Create screen-off hours. Build rituals around logging out. These practices send a message to your system. I'm in charge now. You can also reverse engineer your exposure. Algorithms respond to behavior. So if you engage with content that supports your growth, you'll see more of it. Like and save material that aligns with your vision. Comment meaningfully. Share consciously. This tells the system to serve you more of what feeds you. Don't forget digital relationships, group chats, comment threads, DM exchanges. These can be sources of support or drains of energy. Start noticing how these interactions affect you. Are you performing? Are you people-pleasing? Are you stuck in loops of drama or gossip? Energy isn't just consumed by content, it's also drained by dynamics. Choose your digital conversations with the same discernment you use for real-life ones. Create digital spaces for depth. A saved folder of meaningful posts. A private document for captured insights. A playlist that brings you back to center. Use your technology to reinforce who you're becoming, not distract you from it. Let it serve as an extension of your values, not a replacement for your attention. Be aware of doom loops. This is when you seek clarity, but end up overwhelmed. You search for answers, but fall into content spirals that confuse more than clarify. When that happens, pause. Close the tab. Return to your body. Ask, what question was I trying to answer? Then take that question offline. Let your own wisdom speak first before asking the internet to speak for you. You can also designate one day each week to be a digital detox day. No social media, no unnecessary browsing. Just you and your thoughts, your world, your presence. This may feel uncomfortable at first. That's the detox. It's not a punishment, it's a return. Notice the shift in tone after prolonged digital exposure. Are you more agitated, more impatient, more insecure? These are not random moods, they are feedback from your system. Don't ignore them. Use them as cues to reset. Create checkpoints for your online consumption. A 5-minute journal at the end of the day asking, what did I consume? What effect did it have? What will I choose differently tomorrow? This small practice keeps your attention clean. It stops days from slipping into digital fog. Pay attention to subtle mimicry. The way you speak, dress, create, or even think might start reflecting the dominant voices in your feed. You might not notice at first, but your originality can fade when you're constantly absorbing external templates. Detoxing isn't about isolation, it's about returning to your unique expression. Don't underestimate the value of boredom. When you stop filling every gap with scrolling, you begin to reconnect with your own creative rhythm. You start daydreaming again. You return to self-generated thought. That's where breakthroughs come from. That's where your deeper self begins to speak louder than any algorithm. Use analog alternatives. Write in a notebook instead of typing. Read a physical book instead of another post. Walk without your phone. Cook without a podcast. Let your senses re-engage with the world outside the screen. This kind of grounding resets your entire system and restores depth. Notice how time feels when you're online. Scarcity, rushing, losing track. These are symptoms of digital drift. Your brain doesn't know how long you've been consuming. It just registers that presence has been lost. Reclaiming that presence starts with micro-choices. One pause, one scroll skipped, one app closed with intention. Be honest about content that feels good but feeds avoidance. Self-help content can feel productive but still be a distraction from action. Inspiration isn't transformation. Growth doesn't happen from endless consumption. It happens when you put down the phone and begin living what you already know. Let your devices reflect your vision. Declutter your apps. Remove those that keep you in loops. Reorganize your home screen to feature only what supports your focus. Change your wallpaper to a word or image that grounds you. Your digital tools are not just tools, they're environments. Shape them like you would your home. Your personality is malleable. Your thoughts are influenced. That's not weakness, it's wiring. But once you see how digital inputs shape emotional tone, decision-making, even self-concept, you can start choosing differently. You become a conscious curator. Detoxing isn't about judgment. It's about design. It's about moving from passive user to empowered creator. From being pulled in all directions to choosing where your mind rests. Because when your digital space reflects your clarity, your real life begins to echo that clarity too. You stop reacting. You stop fragmenting. You start creating. You return to a self that is no longer hijacked by invisible noise, but guided by your own signal. And in that space, you remember that you were never meant to be content for someone else's algorithm. You were meant to be the author of your own mind. Once you begin to detox your digital environment and take back control of the influences shaping your thoughts and emotions, you start to notice a clearer inner voice coming through. Your attention feels more your own. Your choices feel more aligned. But there's still one powerful practice that most people overlook. One that doesn't just deepen self-awareness, but sharpens it like a blade. It's the practice of contrast. If you only expose yourself to familiar voices, similar lifestyles, and predictable content, you create an echo chamber. Everything you hear reflects what you already believe. It feels comfortable, but it keeps you soft. It makes your truth feel real, but only because it's never tested. The most rapid clarity often comes from placing yourself in spaces where you do not automatically agree on purpose. This isn't about debate, it's about exposure. When you see a completely different way of living, thinking, working, or relating, your core values are either challenged or confirmed. You're not just consuming ideas, you're holding them up to your inner compass to see what resonates and what doesn't. That contrast becomes a mirror. It shows you who you are by revealing who you're not. To do this consciously, start by identifying the patterns in your current environment. What kinds of voices dominate your space? Are they mostly from your own generation, political view, industry, spiritual belief, or cultural background? Are you surrounded by people who think like you, look like you, or live like you? The more homogeneous the input, the more blind spots you carry without realizing it. Then ask, what's missing from my field of view? Who lives differently? Who believes the opposite of what I believe? What voices do I silently judge or avoid, not because they've harmed me, but because they threaten my comfort? The next step is exposure, not to convert, but to understand. Read a book written by someone from a completely different worldview. Listen to conversations between people who hold radically different perspectives. Attend events outside your typical interest. Travel to unfamiliar places, not just physically, but emotionally and intellectually. You are not seeking agreement. You are seeking definition. When you encounter contrast, pay attention to your emotional response. Do you get defensive, curious, dismissive, triggered? Your reactions are feedback. They tell you where you still hold assumptions that haven't been examined. They tell you where identity is still wrapped in unchallenged stories. Use that discomfort as a guide. Ask yourself, is this resistance a signal of misalignment, or is it protection of ego? There's a difference between rejecting something because it violates your values and rejecting it because it threatens your existing self-image. Learning to tell them apart is how you grow in emotional maturity. Contrast also teaches you nuance. You stop seeing ideas as black or white. You start to understand the layers in between. You might disagree with a worldview, but still find a practice or principle within it that resonates. That's refinement. You're not absorbing whole systems. You're extracting insight and discarding what doesn't fit. Over time, contrast builds conviction. When you've tested your beliefs against friction and they still stand, they become yours fully. Not inherited, not repeated, but chosen. That kind of belief is unshakable because it's been earned. One powerful tool is contrast journaling. When exposed to a different view, write down your immediate response. Then ask, what did I assume before hearing this? What surprised me? What challenged me? What, if anything, did I learn about myself in this exchange? This reflective practice strengthens your ability to learn without defensiveness. Contrast is also deeply useful in designing your future. If you're unclear on what you want, spend time looking at extremes. If you're unsure whether you want structure or freedom, place yourself in highly disciplined environments, then in completely unstructured ones. See which one drains you and which one expands you. Don't decide from theory. Let lived contrast shape your clarity. This is also how you explore identity. If you've lived as a quiet observer, try stepping into spaces that ask for boldness. If you've always led, try following. If you've always blended in, try standing out, not permanently, just long enough to learn something new about your own capacity. Sometimes your most authentic self is hiding on the other side of roles you've never tried. Contrast brings perspective. The more variety you encounter, the less attached you become to the idea that your way is the only way. This doesn't dilute your beliefs, it refines them. It makes space for humility. It lets you hold strength without superiority. It lets you stand firm without needing to convert others. Conscious contrast also interrupts autopilot. You may have been following habits and routines simply because they've been repeated, not because they're aligned. Exposure to different models of life reminds you that many things you considered normal are actually optional. That freedom lets you redesign. This practice is also helpful in emotional healing. If you've only ever seen love expressed through conflict, try witnessing love expressed through calm. If you've only known work as sacrifice, explore work rooted in joy. These contrasting models give your nervous system new evidence. They expand what your body believes is possible. This doesn't mean romanticizing other ways of living. It means letting contrast awaken curiosity. You're not looking for a new script. You're gathering material to write your own with more detail and depth. Relationships benefit from this practice too. If you only spend time with people who agree with you, you miss out on deeper growth. Try having real, respectful conversations with those who challenge your ideas. Stay open. Ask more questions than you answer. Practice listening without planning your reply. This builds emotional resilience and communication skill. Even your creative process gains power from contrast. If you're stuck, expose yourself to something wildly different. If you write non-fiction, read poetry. If you make quiet music, study aggressive sound. If you build with minimalism, observe maximalism. Let extremes sharpen your own artistic identity. One often missed benefit of contrast is gratitude. When you step into other realities, you begin to see your own with new eyes. What you once took for granted becomes sacred. What you once complained about becomes manageable. You stop assuming your way is better, and you start appreciating it more deeply because it's chosen, not automatic. Practicing contrast also teaches you how to disagree without disconnecting. You stop seeing disagreement as a threat. You stop needing others to validate your path. You learn to coexist with difference without shrinking, attacking, or retreating. This is a rare and vital skill. Over time, your internal world becomes more flexible. You're less rigid, less reactive, more grounded. You stop breaking down when things don't go your way because you've trained your mind to hold multiple possibilities. You've seen other ways of being, and instead of feeling lost, you feel more stable in your own. It's important to balance contrast with integration. If you take in too much novelty without reflection, you get confused. So, after exposure, pause. Let the insights settle. Ask what you'll carry forward and what you'll release. Then return to your own path with stronger direction. This practice is ongoing. You never outgrow it. Because the world is always changing, and so are you. What feels true now may evolve later. The willingness to keep learning without losing yourself is what makes your path dynamic and alive. Contrast, when done consciously, makes you sharper, more certain, less reactive, more connected. It pulls you out of echo chambers and into a deeper relationship with your own mind. It doesn't just show you new options, it shows you what's real for you now. And in a world where sameness is often mistaken for truth, choosing to step into contrast is how you come home to the truth that's actually yours. Not borrowed, not performed, fully lived. As you begin to embrace contrast and engage with different ways of thinking, your own path becomes clearer. You develop emotional depth, mental flexibility, and a greater tolerance for difference. But clarity doesn't mean everything suddenly feels easy. In fact, the more grounded you become, the more aware you are of the people who challenge you most. Those interactions, the ones that trigger your old patterns, test your patience, or break your heart, are often not distractions from your growth. They are a part of it, and sometimes they're the most important part. Difficult relationships aren't random. They're mirrors. They reflect back the places where healing is incomplete, where boundaries are unclear, where wounds are still alive. These people often play roles we didn't ask for, but without them, we wouldn't see the deeper lessons life is trying to teach us. That's why reframing these connections as soul contracts, temporary or long-term agreements meant to awaken growth, can be one of the most powerful tools for personal transformation. A soul contract is not about fate or spiritual dogma. It's a perspective, one that helps you shift from blame to responsibility, from resentment to reflection. It asks a deeper question. What has this person, through their difficulty, their presence, or even their absence, forced me to face that I wouldn't have seen on my own? Start by looking at the emotional patterns triggered by this person. Do they make you feel dismissed, unseen, inadequate, angry, dependent, or reactive? Instead of trying to change the person or fix the emotion, explore the pattern itself. When was the first time you felt this way? Where else does this emotion show up in your life? Who taught you to respond like this? These patterns are the roots of your contract. They existed before this person arrived. Their behavior simply activated it. And while their actions are their responsibility, your reaction is your curriculum. The first lesson most difficult people teach is self-boundary. If someone continually drains your energy, oversteps your limits, or creates emotional chaos, they're showing you where your clarity needs to be stronger. You may learn how to say no without guilt, how to disengage without shutting down, how to speak truth without needing validation. These are not personality traits, they are muscles built through repetition. The second lesson is detachment. Not detachment as indifference, but as release from emotional dependency. When someone close to you triggers abandonment, rejection, or betrayal wounds, your growth may lie in learning how to hold your ground emotionally, to feel disappointment without collapse, to love without losing yourself. This teaches you where your center really lives. Another lesson is identity refinement. Difficult people often challenge how you see yourself. They may not believe in your growth. They may reduce you to who you used to be, or they may treat you as someone less than you are. And while it's painful, this forces you to ask, who am I when no one agrees with my evolution? Can I keep showing up as who I've chosen to become, even when others don't reflect it back? There's also the lesson of shadow work. Sometimes the traits we dislike in others are reflections of parts of ourselves we haven't accepted. A controlling person may highlight where you feel out of control. A selfish person may reveal where you abandon your own needs. An emotionally unavailable person may mirror your own fear of intimacy. This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it does reveal a layer of your own healing. Forgiveness becomes a part of this work, not as permission for harm, but as release from bondage. When you hold on to bitterness, you stay energetically tied to the person and the pain. Forgiveness is how you return to freedom. You can forgive and still walk away. You can forgive and still hold boundaries. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's choosing not to carry what they gave you as part of your identity. Some difficult people come into your life to teach endings. Not all contracts are meant to last. Sometimes the growth lies in the leaving, in learning to let go with dignity, in releasing the fantasy of what someone could be and accepting what they are. The clarity to walk away often takes more strength than staying ever did. There are also contracts that remain in your life but evolve. Family members, long-term partners, co-workers. You may not be able to create physical distance, but you can still change the energetic dynamic. You do this by shifting your role in the interaction, If you've been the fixer, step back. If you've been the peacekeeper, speak up. If you've been the avoider, engage. These small shifts begin to rewrite the contract. One helpful approach is to write a soul letter, not to send, but to understand. Write from the perspective that this person came to teach you something. What have they revealed? What have they forced you to develop? What would you say if you no longer needed to defend, attack, or convince? This kind of writing can break internal loops that conversation often can't. Use your body as a guide. When you think of this person, what happens physically? Tight chest, clenched jaw, numbness. These responses are maps. They show you where energy is still stuck. Movement, breathwork, and somatic practices can help you release what words cannot. Sometimes the contract is held in the tissue, not the story. You can also symbolically close or update contracts. This might mean writing down what you're releasing and burning it, saying aloud what you're no longer available for, visualizing a new dynamic, or setting a boundary that defines what you'll accept moving forward. Ritual brings closure when the relationship itself cannot. Not all difficult people are negative. Some challenge you through love. A friend who calls you out, a mentor who pushes your limits, a partner who reflects back your blind spots. These people stretch you because they believe in your capacity. They don't make things easy, but they help you grow if you stay open. Reframing difficult people as part of your growth journey doesn't mean tolerating abuse, manipulation, or cruelty. Discernment is key. The lesson is not always to stay. Sometimes the most powerful contract is the one that ends in silence, distance, and peace. Knowing the difference is part of your evolution. Relationships are not just emotional, they're spiritual classrooms, and the most complex ones offer the deepest lessons, not through perfection, but through friction. Your growth isn't in controlling the person. It's in mastering your response, in staying aligned when it would be easier to collapse. The goal is not to make every relationship ideal, it's to use every interaction as information. What is this showing me about my needs, wounds, values, and evolution? That mindset puts you in a position of power, not dominance, but clarity. Your life will always include difficult people. But when you shift from seeing them as problems to seeing them as portals, something changes. You stop wasting energy trying to fix them. You start using that energy to fortify yourself. Over time, the same people who once triggered you become neutral or even sacred. Not because they changed, but because you did. You extracted the lesson. You integrated the insight. You no longer carry the weight of trying to make the relationship something it was never meant to be. This doesn't make you heartless. It makes you wise. It makes you sovereign. And when you begin to move through life with that level of emotional maturity, you attract fewer lessons in the form of pain. Because your system no longer needs chaos to grow. It now chooses growth directly. That's the final lesson of the soul contract. To graduate from the curriculum of pain and step into the path of conscious choice. After exploring the deeper meaning behind difficult relationships and extracting their lessons, you begin to see how much of your personal growth has been shaped by others. But now the lens turns inward. Because even as you release old dynamics and step into emotional clarity, one relationship still determines everything else. The one you have with yourself. Not the version others see, but the one that shows up when no one is watching. The version that stares back at you when you stand in front of a mirror. This is where mirror work begins. And not just the surface-level affirmations, but something deeper, Mirror Work 2.0. A practice not only of reflection, but of reconstruction. A method for confronting the parts of yourself you've ignored, silenced, or judged. A path to reprogram the internal patterns that have been running your life from the shadows. This work isn't about staring at your face and saying nice things until you believe them. It's about using direct self-gaze as a tool to bring buried truth to the surface. Your face holds stories. The way your eyes shift, the tension in your jaw, the hesitation in your expression, all of these are clues. When you look into your own eyes with full attention, something inside you either resists or awakens. Start by noticing how often you actually meet your own gaze, not checking your appearance, but seeing yourself fully. Most people avoid it, or they do it so quickly they never stay long enough to feel anything. The first step is to create a space for stillness. Stand in front of a mirror. No distractions, no tasks, just you and your reflection. Stay. Even when it gets uncomfortable, especially when it does, that discomfort is the entry point. As you look at yourself, notice what thoughts arise, what judgments come up, what memories surface. What emotional weight do you carry in your expression? You are not there to fix your face. You are there to read your face, to see the parts of you you've spent years avoiding. Now, shift into listening. Mirror work isn't just visual, it's energetic. Ask your reflection questions. Say, what do you need me to stop pretending about? Or, what part of you have I been abandoning? Then wait, not for a voice, but for a feeling, an insight, an emotional shift. Your body knows more than your mind allows. This process helps surface subconscious programming. Messages you've repeated silently for years begin to rise. I'm not enough. I'll always be behind. No one really sees me. These thoughts often hide in the tone of your self-talk. The mirror becomes a truth detector. You can't lie to yourself while holding eye contact. When a painful belief surfaces, don't argue with it. Don't try to bury it. Instead, ask where it came from. Who planted that seed? When did you first start believing it? Your reflection becomes not just a witness, but a portal to memory. You begin to trace the origin of your inner critic. This is when reprogramming begins. Reprogramming doesn't mean repeating positive phrases mindlessly. It means offering a new truth from a place of presence. You look at yourself and say, I see the part of you that felt forgotten. You're safe now. Or, I know you've carried shame for years, but I won't add to it anymore. Speak to yourself like a trusted guardian, not with fluff, but with reverence. Use specific language. Generic affirmations like, I am amazing, don't penetrate when the wound runs deep. But saying, you didn't deserve to be ignored, or your voice matters now, speaks directly to the parts of you that never heard those words before. Precision is powerful. The more specific your words, the deeper the impact. Add physical anchoring. Place your hand over your heart or gently on your face as you speak. This adds somatic reinforcement. Your body begins to associate the words with safety, not performance. Over time, these moments create new emotional memories, ones that tell your nervous system a different story. Mirror work also brings buried dreams back into awareness. Look at your reflection and ask, what did I give up on too soon? Then watch what flashes through your mind. You may see an image, a version of your younger self, a forgotten desire. Don't analyze it. Feel it. let it speak. When you reconnect with those lost parts, acknowledge the grief. You may realize how long you've been pretending not to care. That pretending created emotional numbness. The mirror becomes a place to feel again, to mourn what was lost, but also to decide what can still be revived. Begin making promises to your reflection, not future fantasies, but small, grounded commitments. I will protect your time today. I won't abandon you in that meeting. I'll choose rest instead of punishment tonight. These are not just words, they are contracts, spoken directly to the part of you that remembers every broken one. You can also use mirror work to rewrite your emotional tone. Look into your eyes and name the emotions you usually carry. I see how tired you are of pretending. I see the fire under your fear. Then shift the tone. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. Or, today we move from tension to trust. This rewires how your system prepares for the day ahead. Repeat these sessions regularly. They don't need to be long. Even 3 minutes each morning and evening can shift your internal rhythm. Over time, your reflection stops being a stranger. It becomes a partner, a witness to your progress, a container for your transformation. On hard days, use the mirror to hold space. Stand there and say, "We're still here. We haven't given up. This pain is real, but it's not the end." These are not just affirmations, they are anchors. They stabilize you when the ground feels unsteady. You can deepen the practice by incorporating breath. As you look into your eyes, inhale slowly and say, "I receive." Exhale gently and say, "I release." You can receive strength, clarity, compassion. You can release shame, doubt, resentment. The breath becomes a ritual of return. Another layer is gratitude, not for achievements or outcomes, but for survival. Say to your reflection, "Thank you for not giving up when it would have been easier. Thank you for carrying so much without breaking." Gratitude expressed directly to your own eyes has a different weight. It reclaims dignity. Over time, you may notice your self-perception changing, not because your outer image changed, but because your inner dialogue softened. Your energy begins to shift before your behavior does. You move through the day with less need to prove, less fear of being seen, and more willingness to protect your peace. This version of mirror work rewires old programming by introducing truth in a space that often held judgment. You no longer just use mirrors for critique. You use them for communion. You look into your own eyes and say, "This is where we begin again." It's not about perfection. It's about presence. Some days you'll feel fake. Some days you won't believe what you're saying. Keep going. You're not speaking to your doubt. You're speaking to the part of you that never stopped hoping you'd come back. This is how you rebuild trust with yourself. Slowly, daily, with honesty and patience. Because when you finally meet your own eyes with compassion instead of critique, everything else begins to reflect that shift back to you. Conversations soften, decisions align, boundaries hold, and the world outside no longer has the final word on your worth. Because now, every day, you look in the mirror and remember who you are, before the world told you who to be. You've just walked through something most people spend their whole lives avoiding: yourself, not the surface version, the real you, the one hidden beneath habits, distractions, fears, and roles that were never truly yours. Together, we explored the architecture of identity, the power of micro-decisions, the alchemy of emotion, the clarity born from contrast, and the quiet courage of surrender. You learned how to set boundaries with your time, with your energy, with your story. You rewrote narratives that were written for you and started building a life that's designed by you. You looked into mirrors that don't lie and faced truths that most people never do. You unhooked from external noise, detoxed your digital environment, and chose instead to trust your inner compass. And throughout it all, you practiced the quiet, ancient power of Stoicism, not as a philosophy trapped in books, but as a living code for clarity, presence, and self-respect. Becoming the best version of yourself isn't a finish line. It's a rhythm, a return, a remembrance of what's always been within you: reason, discipline, courage, and peace. The work doesn't end here, but now you have the map. The rest is choice. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment below and complete this sentence. From this day forward, I choose to. It can be one word, a promise, a shift. Whatever you're claiming as yours, name it, write it, own it, because the moment you name it, it starts becoming real. And if this journey moved you, subscribe to the channel. This is where transformation is spoken out loud. This is where the real ones gather. This is where the next chapter begins.